Chapter 2243. Map borrowing. Zhuowen frowned and asked in a deep voice, "How long does the moon ancestor usually stay in seclusion for?" Yuezu usually stays in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. Ever since the battle between Lord Brahma and the mysterious woman, Yuezu has only just started his seclusion. So, Han Yin said helplessly. In other words, I have to wait for Yuezu to come out of seclusion. Zhuowen was speechless. Yuezu usually stayed in seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. How long would he have to wait for Yuezu to come out of seclusion? Han Yin's expression changed slightly. That's not necessarily true. Although I'm the Supreme Elder, Yuezu was already in seclusion when I returned. I can't contact Yuezu, but the Sect Master can. I can help you contact the Sect Master. Just as Zhuowen Gang was about to agree, his communication jade talisman suddenly lit up. He looked at it and saw that it was a message from Tong Chimei. Her master wanted to meet him to discuss the star chart of the 8 heavens. Brother Han, come with me to the Sect Master's Great Hall. The Sect Master has already summoned me. Zhuowen stood up and called out to Han Yin. Then, he turned into a streak of light and left the peach forest. Han Yin was surprised, but he still followed closely behind Zhuowen with Lin Shiping. At the entrance of the Sect Master's Great Hall, a beautiful figure stood quietly. A gentle breeze blew past, lifting her hair. She was full of charm and charm. The beautiful figure looked in the direction of the peach forest. When she saw 2 streaks of light fly over, her beautiful eyes lit up with joy. The 2 streaks of light stopped in front of the beautiful figure, revealing 3 figures. These 3 people were naturally Zhuowen, Han Yin, and Lin Shiping. The beautiful figure was, needless to say, Tong Chimei. When Tong Chimei saw Han Yin behind Zhuowen, she exclaimed in surprise. However, she didn't forget her etiquette. She bowed and said, "Chimei greets the Supreme Elder." "Chimei, you're welcome. Let us in," Han Yin said with a smile. Tong Chimei nodded and didn't say anything. She led the 3 of them into the Sect Master's Great Hall. The Sect Great Hall was extremely luxurious. It was many times more luxurious than the palaces of ordinary emperors. Pillars carved with crescent-shaped patterns stood tall, supporting the huge hall. A large hall, Great Hall. The Great Hall's Sect Master, Saturday. 5 cups of tea and 5 seats were placed on the stone table. 5 seats. Little friend Zhua, Elder Han, please sit, Elder Waning Moon said with a calm smile. Zhuowen, Han Yin, and the others sat down. Elder Waning Moon took a sip of tea and said softly, "Zhua Xiaoyu, I heard from Elder Han that it was thanks to you that he was able to come out of the spatial fault. This time, our half-moon hall owes you a favor. Chimei also told me that you wanted to borrow the 8 heavens incomplete star map. Our half-moon hall has always repaid kindness with kindness and hatred with hatred. Since we owe you a favor and you need the 8 heavens incomplete star map, I will lend it to you on behalf of the half-moon hall. However, you can only use it for 3 days." Hearing this, Zhuowen naturally agreed. He cupped his fists and said seriously, "If Sect Master Waning Moon is willing to lend us the 8 heavens incomplete star map, I will be extremely grateful. As for the time, 3 days is enough." Elder Waning Moon nodded and flicked her finger. 8 rays of blue light shot out from her spirit ring. Upon closer inspection, the 8 rays of blue light contained 8 jade slips. Needless to say, each jade slip represented a heaven's incomplete star map. Seeing Zhuowen put away the 8 jade slips, Elder Waning Moon reminded him, "Zhua Xiaoyu, these 8 jade slips are not complete. They are more or less incomplete." So Zhuowen cupped his fists and said, "Thank you. I only need 3 days." After speaking, Zhuowen chatted with Elder Waning Moon and the others for a while before leaving. Tong Chimei naturally took Zhuowen back to her cave. After Zhuowen and Tong Chimei left, Han Yin also left the Sect Master's Hall. Elder Waning Moon was left sitting in front of the stone table. "Elder Waning Moon, what do you think of this Zhuowen?" Suddenly, a low voice slowly resounded in the spacious hall. Elder Waning Moon said, "Ancestor, I feel like this Zhuowen isn't as strong as the rumors say. However, I admit that his talent is much stronger than Chimei's. It hasn't been long, but his cultivation is already at the 6th step of the Void Sky stage. The truth will never be seen through. If you can tell that this child is extraordinary with a single glance, then he will disappoint me. But clearly, that is not the case. Maybe you can't tell that this child is different, but I can. This child has the strength to fight against Lord Brahma. The low voice rang out again. Elder Waning Moon was shocked and said in disbelief, "Ancestor, are you joking? After all, Lord Brahma has grasped the heaven-breaking source and is more terrifying than ordinary void sky cultivators. How can this Zhuowen be so powerful?" The low voice continued, "Perhaps you can't feel it, but I can feel that there is a power hidden in this child's body that makes me very wary. Although I don't know what kind of power it is, I feel that this power has an extremely powerful destructive power. It is even more threatening than Lord Brahma." The more Elder Waning Moon listened, the more shocked she became. Her beautiful face finally became serious. Although she did look at Zhuowen in a new light, that was only the attitude of a senior looking at a junior. However, after hearing this voice's evaluation, she no longer had this attitude. She knew that the power hidden in Zhuowen's body was very likely stronger than hers. At the same time, she thought of the 5 sects that Zhuowen had destroyed. Although those 5 sects couldn't compare to the Half Moon Hall, it would still take a lot of effort for the Half Moon Hall to destroy those 5 sections. However, Zhuowen had done it by himself. This definitely wasn't a fluke. Pay attention to this child. You must be on good terms with him. Also, I can see that Chimei has a very good impression of this child. If necessary, you can actually betroth Chimei to Zhuowen. The low voice sounded again. However, Elder Waning Moon frowned and said, "Ancestor, this isn't appropriate. After all, Chimei is the future successor of the Half Moon Hall. If she marries someone else, wouldn't we be handing the Half Moon Hall over to Zhuowen?" The low voice was silent for a moment before saying, "This matter can't be rushed. Chimei has the bloodline of our Half Moon Hall's ancestor. As long as Chimei can recover the dusty memories in her mind, she will be able to lead the Half Moon Hall to an even higher peak. Then it's better to be on good terms with Zhuowen first. The marriage alliance can be delayed. However, it's not a bad thing to let Chimei get closer to this Zhuowen. This Zhuowen has entered the Tower of Hanoi. Sooner or later, he will face the Great Brahma. When that time comes, if this Zhuowen really has the strength to fight against the Great Brahma, why can't our Half Moon Hall help this Zhuowen attack the Great Brahma?" Elder Waning Moon sighed and said, "Then will he be the next Purple Star Monarch?" Back then, the Purple Star Monarch was so outstanding, but in the end, he still couldn't pass the top level of the Tower of Hanoi. Even if he did pass the top level, he would only be nibbled away by the Great Brahma. Chapter 2244. Spacetime Quicksand Riverjuan sat cross-legged on a futon in an elegant attic room. 8 jade slips that emitted a faint blue light floated around him. The 8 jade slips represented the star maps of the 8 heavens. Among them, the star map of the Great Brahma Heavens domain was the most complete. The other 7 heavens maps were more or less incomplete. Zhuowen's glabella shone with a dazzling golden light. Countless rays of divine sense flowed into the 8 jade slips that floated around him. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful. He divided his divine sense into 8 parts and drilled them into the 8 jade slips. He was multitasking, reading the map in the jade slips. The heavens territory was too vast, so it would take Zhuowen a lot of time to browse through all of them. If an ordinary cultivator wanted to spend 3 days to browse through all 8 jade slips, it would be basically impossible to achieve. However, Zhuowen's divine sense was too powerful. 3 days was more than enough for him. On the morning of the 3rd day, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell on the jade slip behind him. He reached out with his right hand and pinched the jade slip in his palm. The other 7 jade slips all fell to the ground, their light dim. 6 desires heaven. Zhuowen looked at the jade slips silently and murmured in a low voice. 6 desires heaven was the heavens where Moyan Wushang was taken away by the mysterious woman. If he remembered correctly, the mysterious woman intended to take Moyen Wushang to Six Desires Palace. Decades had passed since then. Speaking of which, Zhuowen missed Moyen Wushang very much. Zhuowen quickly made a copy of the jade slip, then put away the 8 jade slips and walked out of the attic. He had browsed through the star maps of the 8 heavens. Although there were many incomplete places, fortunately, the location of the space-time key was not in the incomplete area. In the end, Zhuowen locked onto the location of the key in the river of space-time quicksand in the 6 Desires heavens. The river of space-time quicksand was a forbidden area in the 6 Desires heavenly domain. It was an extremely dangerous place, and its name struck terror in the hearts of the people in the 6 Desires heavenly domain. When he walked out of the attic, Tong Chimei, who was guarding outside, walked towards him. "Chimei, take this jade slip back. I've already finished reading it." Zhuowen handed the 8 jade slips to Tong Chimei. The latter's beautiful eyes were filled with surprise as she looked at Zhuowen. There's a lot of information about the 8 heaven star charts. Even she wouldn't be able to finish reading them in 3 days, but Zhuowen said that he had finished reading them. Of course, Tong Chimei didn't think that Zhuowen was bragging. It wasn't her first time meeting Zhuowen, and she knew Zhuowen's character. Since Zhuowen said that he had finished reading it, he must have finished reading it. He would never say anything about such a trivial matter. Putting away the jade slip, Tong Chimei asked, "Big brother Zhuo, have you found the place you're looking for?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "Found it, thanks to the star chart of the 8 heavens." "Where is it?" Tong Chimei asked curiously. "The river of space-time quicksand in the 6 Desires heavens." Zhuowen said. Tong Chimei wasn't an outsider. She had a good relationship with Zhuowen, so he didn't hide the river of space-time quicksand. Moreover, even if Tong Chimei knew about the river of space-time quicksand, without the map on Zhuowen, she couldn't know the correct way to enter the river of space-time quicksand. After entering, she would be like a blind man searching for an elephant. Only with the real map could she find the space-time divine key hidden in the river of space-time quicksand. "It's the river of space-time quicksand? Big brother Zhuo, do you know how dangerous the river of space-time quicksand is? This place can definitely be called the most dangerous place in the 6 Desires heavens. Its reputation is comparable to the great Brahma domain's starry sky, fault, and waning moons. Do you plan to go there?" Tong Chimei's pretty face changed slightly. Obviously, she had heard of the river of space-time quicksand. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Chimei, don't worry. It's not like you don't know my character. I won't do something I'm not confident in." Tong Chimei frowned slightly and could only sigh. She knew Zhuowen's character, so she didn't try to persuade him. She only reminded Zhuowen to be more careful. "That's right, Chimei. Do you know where else there are calamity crystals other than the training grounds in the Middle Universe?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. Zhuowen's clone, Devour, had already cultivated to the level of Thunder Fire Real God. However, he had used up all the calamity crystals. As a result, he hadn't even survived a single wind disaster. If he had a large number of calamity crystals now, he would have definitely survived a few wind disasters and wouldn't still be a Thunderfire Real God. Tong Chimei muttered to herself for a moment and said, "The calamity crystals are rare ores. If Big Brother Zhuo needs them, our Half Moon Hall has some. I can give them to you." "How many does your Half Moon Hall have?" Zhuowen asked. Tong Chimei said, "About several tens of thousands. I'm not too sure about the specifics. These calamity crystals were obtained by the other disciples in the Middle Universe training grounds." Zhuowen revealed a disappointed expression. Several tens of thousands of calamity crystals were like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood to him. It should be known that when he had passed through the lightning disasters of fire disasters, he had used up several tens of thousands of calamity crystals, or even millions of calamity crystals. The amount of calamity crystals he had obtained in the training grounds was definitely the most. Unfortunately, Devour was like a bottomless pit. The speed at which he used up the calamity crystals was too fast. After becoming a Thunderfire Real God, Zhuowen could imagine that Devour's consumption of calamity crystals would be even more ferocious than before. As for waiting for the wind disasters to arrive, it would take too long. Zhuowen really couldn't afford to wait. Tong Chimei could also see the disappointment on Zhuowen's face. She knew that Zhuowen didn't care about the several tens of thousands of calamity crystals. Big brother Zhuo, do you need a lot of calamity crystals? Tong Chimei asked. Zhuowen nodded and said, to be honest, my doppelganger is walking the path of 3 extreme realms. I think you've heard of this realm, so my need for calamity crystals is indeed huge. Tong Chimei wasn't surprised. She had known that Zhuowen's doppelganger was walking the path of 3 extreme realms for a long time. Tong Chimei pondered for a moment and then said in a deep voice, Big brother Zhuo, in the entire Great Brahma domain, other than the training ground in the middle of the universe, only the extreme west has reserves of calamity crystals. It is said that there are mines of calamity crystals in the Inqing Yuan, Quebec. Inqing Yuan K. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Inqing Yuan K was huge. Although Zhuowen and the others had entered the deepest part of Inqing Yuan K, the Luo God Palace ruins, that was only the core of Inqing Yuan, Quebec. He was sure that there were no calamity crystals in the Luo God Palace ruins, and Tong Chimei wouldn't lie to him. In other words, the calamity crystals should be outside the core of Inqing Yuan, Quebec. Chapter 2245. Ryuka's strange situation. Many thanks, Chimei. I might have to return to the far west this time. Please send my regards to the sect master, Yuezu, and Elder Hanyan. This is the heavenly domain starry sky essence. Please take good care of it. Zhuowen cupped his fists, took out a bottle of heavenly domain starry sky essence, and handed it to Tong Chimei before leaving. Tong Chimei silently watched Zhuowen's back as he left. She let out a soft sigh, but did not try to persuade him to stay. After leaving the half-moon hall, Zhuowen took out his flying ship and left the star field in a streak of light. In the far west, the myriad magnet sea was shrouded in a powerful magnetic field. Ever since the 4 great islands' failed crusade against Dubby City, the myriad magnet sea became the sole ruler of Ryuka. Ryuka's fame was unparalleled, and they became the strongest force in the myriad magnet sea and even the far west. Moreover, because Zhuowen obtained all the resources of the Luotian Palace, Ryuka's development in Dubby City was extremely fast. In the far west, all the cultivators who had heard of the Long family were filled with awe. However, most of them were eager to become a disciple of the Long family. In the far west, who did not know that Ryuka was rich and had a deep foundation. Most of the cultivators who joined Ryuka had their cultivations greatly increased. They were very clear that this was because Ryuka was rich in resources, and the energy in the Ryuka's territory was much denser than the other places in the far west. At this moment, in the Ryuka Tower in Dubby City, Zhuo Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Lu Hantian, Do Xian, and the other Ryuka higher-ups were sitting in the hall, their brows tightly knitted, not saying a word. The entire hall was eerily silent. Finally, Lu Hantian spoke. He stood up and said in a deep voice, Everyone, what should we do now? Chun Shui has disappeared without a trace. Even if we send out many people, we have no news at all. If Zhuowen comes back, how are we going to explain it to him? Zhuo Xiaotian, who was standing at the head of the table, looked at Feng Xiao beside him. The latter also saw the look in Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes, but she just lowered her head and didn't speak. Zhuo Xiaotian gave a soft sigh and said, Keep searching. I think Qin Shui might have gone out to do something and will be back after a while. Do Xian suddenly spoke up. He cupped his hands at Zhuo Xiaotian and said, City Lord, Madame Qin Shui was with your wife back then. What happened to Madame Qin Shui? Your wife should know best, right? Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes condensed, and she immediately said unhappily, Senior Do Xian, although you are the strongest in Dubby City now and the most respected, my affairs shouldn't be your turn to care, right? Do Xian lowered his head and said in a deep voice, Do Xian doesn't dare. I'm just voicing my thoughts. If Madame doesn't like it, Do Xian will apologize to Madame. Feng Xiao silently looked at Do Xian. Although she was unhappy in her heart, she didn't dare act up. Do Xian's cultivation was indeed the strongest in Dubby City. Over the past 10 years, with the help of the Luotian Palace's resources, Doxian had already reached the peak of the Void Sky 7th step, far surpassing all the Ryuka people in Dubby City. Moreover, Doxian controlled 70% of Dubby City's forces. Although Feng Xiao was unhappy with Doxian's words, she didn't dare fall out with Doxian. AI, don't argue. I'll take care of this matter. As for Chun Shue's matter, Doxian hopes that you can send several tens of thousands of troops to help my people look for her. Shui Xiaodian waved his hand, trying to smooth things over. He then looked at Doxian. Doxian raised his head and revealed a mocking smile as he said, City Lord, I'm very sorry. Our Dubby City is currently being eyed by many forces. For the safety of Dubby City, you can forget about sending several tens of thousands of troops. When these words came out, Shui Xiaoyan's eyes immediately became sharp. However, Doxian didn't back down at all, as if he didn't put Shui Xiaotian in his eyes at all. Doxian, have you forgotten Zhuowen's instructions? You're not the city lord of Dubby City right now, and Uncle Zhuo is the city lord. Do you plan on disobeying the city lord's orders now? Lu Hantian's temper was rather irritable. He immediately stood up and spoke in a cold voice. Doxian coldly looked at Lu Hantian and said, I haven't forgotten, so I'm calling Zhu Xiaotian the city lord. As for orders, only I can manage my troops. Don't even think about interfering. After saying this, Doxian stood up and left the hall. The rest of the people in the hall all revealed looks of anger. Uncle Zhuo, this Doxian is too much. He actually doesn't put you in his eyes at all, just because his cultivation is high. Lu Hantian said with a frown. Zhu Xiaotian sighed softly and said, In the past, the reason why Doxian was so respectful to me was all because of Zhuowen. However, ever since the news of Zhuowen falling into a fault in the starry sky, Doxian doesn't put us in his eyes anymore. There's no one in Ryuka who can suppress this Doxian. Hantian, you have a rather impulsive temper, but don't act recklessly. You're not a match for this Doxian. Furthermore, this Doxian controls most of the troops in Dubby City. It's best not to offend him. Lu Hantian frowned and said, Uncle, if this Doxian goes overboard and forcefully seizes the position, what will we do? This Doxian is simply a despicable person. It's very likely that he will do such a thing. If he wants to seize the position, then I'll give it to him. As long as he can protect the Ryuka people, it's fine. Zhu Xiaotian shook his head helplessly and said. Lu Hantian fell into silence, but he did not refute it. However, there was a flame burning in his eyes. All right, let's end this matter here. You can all leave. Zhu Xiaotian tiredly waved his hand, and the high-level members in the hall all left. Lu Hantian also cupped his hands and left. When there was no one left in the hall, Zhu Xiaotian suddenly looked at Feng Xiao beside him and said in a soft voice, Xiao, what happened? Ever since Chun Shui disappeared, you've been acting strange. Feng Xiao turned around, and Zhu Xiaotian could clearly see the fear in Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes. His heart was filled with even more doubts. Xiaotian, Chun Shui almost killed me in the past. She was very terrifying and powerful at that time, and I couldn't resist her at all. But in the end, I don't know why, but Chun Shui didn't make a move and just left like a crazy person. Feng Xiao said in a daze. Zhuo Xiaoyan's pupils shrank as he said, That's impossible. How could Chun Shui do something like this? She has always been very gentle. Feng Xiao suddenly said in a low voice. Chun Shui said before that she was not like herself. She said that there was a strong, strange power in her body that seemed to be controlling her, making her do a series of strange things. Zhuo Xiaotian fell into silence. He sat in his seat with tightly knit brows. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Shortly after, the winged Wu Dai hurriedly walked in. Her pretty face was filled with a panicked expression. Wu Dai, what happened? Zhuo Xiaotian looked at Wu Dai and asked. Wu Dai quickly said, Uncle Zhuo, quickly come out and help Hantian. He and Doxian are fighting, and if you don't stop them, Hantian will be beaten to death. What? Chapter 2246. Turning the tables under Wu Dai's lead, Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, there was a huge square. At this moment, the square was surrounded by a dense mass of soldiers. Their shouts spread out like thunder, and it sounded like they were making a huge commotion. In the center of the square, two figures were exchanging blows at an extremely fast speed. If one looked carefully, one would see that one of the figures was in an extremely sorry state. He was at an absolute disadvantage and was knocked to the ground time and time again. When Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao were brought to the square by Wu Dai, the cheering soldiers became much softer and consciously opened up a path for them. The surrounding soldiers silently looked at Zhuo Xiaotian, the city lord, but no one shouted the name of the city lord, nor did anyone salute the city lord. Zhuo Xiaotian frowned slightly, but he didn't care about this detail. He was worried about Lu Hantian. Lu Hantian's talent was very strong. Over the years, he relied on the resources of Luotian Palace to raise his cultivation to the 5th step of the Void Sky Realm. However, compared to Dou Xian, who was at the 7th step of the Void Sky Realm, the gap was too big. Therefore, Lu Hantian and Dou Xian fighting now wasn't a wise choice. Bang! A dull sound of something breaking through the air resounded. Immediately after, a sorry figure flew out and crashed in front of Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two. Zhuo Xiaotian shouted and took a step forward. His palms were like the wind as they slammed into the air in front of him. The frightening palm force was just like a furious dragon as it whizzed out. Immediately, it caught the flying figure in his hand. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyesight was amazing. Naturally, he could tell at a glance that the flying figure was Lu Hantian. Boom! When Zhuo Xiaotian's palms came into contact with Lu Hantian's back, an earth-shattering and terrifying force was transmitted to his hands. Pucci! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Zhuo Xiaotian retreated in a sorry state. He only managed to stop himself when he was more than 100 meters away. Zhuo Xiaotian's eyes flashed with a cold light. This force was extremely terrifying. He also realized that this force didn't come from Lu Hantian himself, but Dou Xian deliberately did it. Xiaotian, are you all right? Feng Xiao quickly came to Zhuo Xiaotian's side and said worriedly. Zhuo Xiaotian shook his head, then gently put down Lu Hantian and said, Hantian's injuries are very serious. Xiao, do you still have any healing pills on you? At this moment, Lu Hantian was in a very miserable state. The clothes in front of Lu Hantian's chest were all dyed red with blood. As for Lu Hantian, his chest was heaving up and down. His eyes were tightly shut, and he was completely unconscious. Zhuo Xiaotian could clearly feel that Lu Hantian's aura was gradually weakening. If he didn't have the support of a powerful healing pill, then Lu Hantian would undoubtedly die. Feng Xiao shook her head and said, Xiaotian, I've used up all the divine pills on me, so I can only go to the treasury to get some. Zhuo Xiaotian said, Go get quickly. If you don't use the healing pill, Hantian's injuries will get worse and worse. Feng Xiao also knew that the situation was urgent. She stood up and rushed towards the center of Dubby City, while Wu Dai half knelt beside Lu Hantian, her expression full of panic. Bang! Feng Xiao didn't rush out for long before she was blocked by a divine barrier and involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. Dou Xian, what are you doing? Feng Xiao turned her head and looked at Dou Xian behind her with shock and anger in her beautiful eyes. This divine barrier was released by Dou Xian. Dou Xian slowly walked over from the square. The surrounding soldiers all showed a look of reverence and made a path for Dou Xian. They bowed down with a respectful and humble expression. Madam, this is a battle between me and Lu Hantian. It's best if you don't interfere. And the city lord, you too. Dou Xian said slowly. Zhuo Xiaotian's face suddenly became gloomy. He coldly stared at Dou Xian and said, Do you not have me in your eyes? Do you still want to kill in front of me? The corners of Dou Xian's mouth curled into a mocking smile. He laughed and said, Kill? Yes, today I will kill in front of the city lord I respect. Do you think you can stop me? What right do you have to stop me? Do you have the strength? Zhuo Xiaotian trembled with anger. He growled, Dou Xian, don't forget that the reason you were able to advance to the Void Sky 7 steps is because of my son Zhuoan. Back then, You also made an oath to be loyal to my son. Yes, I did say that I was loyal to Zhuowen, but unfortunately, Zhuowen fell into a fault in the starry sky. Even if he didn't die after falling into that place, he would never be able to come out. In other words, my oath back then can be nullified. Dou Xian said indifferently. You. Zhuo Xiaoyan's eyes were crimson red as he spoke coldly. Dou Xian said impatiently, I don't want to play riddles with you now. I once swore to be loyal to Zhuowen, but I didn't say that I would be loyal to you. Since Zhuowen is no longer here, then it's naturally impossible for me to submit to a group of ants with insufficient strength like you. Now, announce that you're giving the position of city lord to me, and I won't kill all of you out of consideration for Zhuowen. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Zhuo Xiaotian clenched his fists tightly. His gaze passed by Dou Xian and descended onto the group of soldiers behind him. Unfortunately, all of them lowered their heads when they met Zhuo Xiaoyan's gaze, and they didn't dare to make eye contact with him at all. Dou Xian sneered, Don't waste your time. These soldiers will be mine in the future, in the far west. Only the strong can rule over the others. All of you aren't qualified. As soon as he said this, the soldiers behind him knelt on the ground one after another and bowed their heads to Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaoyan's face was deathly pale, and he fell silent. He knew that it was useless for him to say anything now. No matter where he was, he would always rely on his fist to speak. A promise and an agreement would never be reliable. Zhuo Xiaotian silently glanced at the seriously injured Lu Hantian and the helpless Wu Dai at his feet, as well as Feng Xiao, who was not far away with a look of grief and indignation, and he said dejectedly, Remember your promise. I'll give you the position of city lord. As he spoke, Zhuo Xiaotian took off the city lord's token from his waist and threw it to Dou Xian. Dou Xian caught the token with a satisfied look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the key to the treasury that was originally in Feng Xiao's hand was forcibly snatched by Dou Xian. Immediately, Dou Xian flicked his finger and took out a divine pill and threw it to Zhuo Xiaotian. Take this healing divine pill. It's more than enough to save that trash's life. Zhuo Xiaotian caught the divine pill and said angrily, This is only a level 3 divine pill. It doesn't have much effect on cold weather. Dou Xian, you're going too far. As soon as Zhuo Xiaotian finished speaking, a powerful divine power swept over. Zhuo Xiaotian let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. He smashed into the ground dozens of meters away, blood spurting from the corner of his mouth. Dou Xian withdrew his hand, and the divine pill in Zhuo Xiaotian's hand automatically floated and fell into Dou Xian's hand. Immediately, Dou Xian said indifferently, If you're not satisfied, I'll take back this divine pill. If you still dare to talk nonsense, I'll be merciless. Chapter 2247. Abdicate the throne. When Zhuo Xiaotian still wanted to get up, Feng Xiao stretched out her jade hand and held Zhuo Xiaotian down. Xiaotian, calm down. If you continue to be so impulsive, then Dou Xian will really kill you. Feng Xiao quickly said. Zhuo Xiaotian forced himself to calm down and looked at Lu Hantian, who was lying unconscious on the ground not far away, with a trace of guilt in his eyes. If he hadn't been so impulsive just now, perhaps that divine pill wouldn't have been snatched away by Dou Xian. Although the level 3 god pill did not have much of an effect on Lu Hantian's recovery, it could at least stop the deterioration of Lu Hantian's injuries. But now, because of his impulsiveness, the divine pill had been taken away by Dou Xian. Zhuo Xiaotian was indeed regretting it. Uncle Zhuo, you don't have to feel guilty. I still have a level 4 healing divine pill. Although it can't heal Han Tian's injuries, it can at least prevent Han Tian's injuries from worsening. Wu Dai took out a pill covered with green patterns from her spirit ring and fed it to Lu Hantian. After swallowing this pill, Lu Hantian's aura stabilized a lot, and his breathing was not as hurried as before. However, the injuries on his body were too serious, and if he wanted to recover, he would need a higher grade healing pill. When Zhuo Xiaotian saw that Lu Hantian's aura had stabilized, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Xiaotian, The most important thing now is to think of a way to evacuate the Ryuka clansmen from the celestial pivot city. Although Do Xian seems to be letting us go on the surface, I'm afraid that he will secretly kill us. His character is extremely ruthless. Feng Xiao said in a low voice. Xiao Tian nodded and immediately lifted Lu Hantian and hurriedly left the square with Feng Xiao and Wu Dai. After entering the hall, Xiao Tian took out his communication jade token and began to gather the Ryuka tribesmen. Unfortunately, Xiao Tian waited in the hall for 4 hours, but no one came. His heart sank. He knew that something must have happened to the Ryuka, and they must have been held back by Do Xian. Xiao Tian, this is bad. There's a trap array outside. We can't get out. Feng Xiao stood by the window. Her pretty face changed greatly as she said to Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian suddenly slammed his palm on the table and said with a gloomy expression, "What a good Do Xian. He really didn't plan to let us go. Just now it was just a stalling tactic. His goal was to make me give up the Dubby City Lord's Waste token. Then what should we do?" Feng Xiao was also a little flustered. Xiao Tian frowned, but he could only sit in his seat dejectedly. He really couldn't find a good way to leave this place. Do Xian had already planned everything that he could think of. Over the past decade, especially after the news of Zhuowen falling into the starry sky fault had spread to the far west, Do Xian had begun to stir. With Do Xian's prestige and strength, he quickly took control of most of the military forces in Dubby City. In this kind of place, strength and military force were everything. The city lord was just a title. If Do Xian wanted to usurp the throne, he only needed to say a word, and he would successfully become the new city lord. However, Do Xian didn't do that. He wanted Xiao Tian to take the initiative to abdicate and give up the city lord. Xiao Tian, in 3 days, I will hold the city lord conferring ceremony in the square. You must be there. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the safety of your Ryuka people. Suddenly, Do Xian's voice echoed in the hall. Xiao Tian raised his head, his eyes turning red, but he didn't lose his mind. If you dare to touch a hair of my people, I, Xiao Tian, will make you regret it. Xiao Tian said coldly. Do Xian's voice sounded again. Don't worry. If you cooperate in 3 days, I, Do Xian, will let your people leave Dubby City safely. If you violate this oath, the heavenly Tao will devour you. Xiao Tian's eyes flashed. This Do Xian was swearing on the heavenly Tao. It seemed that he really intended to let the Ryuka people go. If you really let the Ryuka people leave safely, I will participate in the city lord conferring ceremony in 3 days, Xiao Tian said coldly. City lord is indeed straightforward. This will be the last time I call you city lord. In 3 days, the new city lord of Dubby City will be born. Do Xian's voice was like thunder. It came and went quickly. 3 days later, in Dubby City's largest square, Dubby Square, people came and went. It was very lively. In the center of the square stood a white jade platform. Do Xian sat on the throne in the center of the platform. On his left and right stood 2 black-armored cultivators with vast auras. The square was surrounded by a dark mass. In addition to the soldiers, there were also the star lords of the planets in the Z-Way galaxy around Dubby City. The so-called star lords were the lords of the planets. They ruled over the living beings of one of the planets in the Z-Way galaxy. Most of them were in the virtual sky world, but of course, they were generally in the early stage of the virtual sky world. At this moment, the star lords around the square were looking at Do Xian on the platform with awe. Although many people knew that a new city lord might be born today, no one came out to speak for justice. They knew that even if Xiao Tian was the rightful city lord of Dubby City, he was not strong enough. As for Zhuowen, who was revered by everyone in Dubby City, many cultivators in Dubby City no longer feared the Long family because of the news that Zhuowen had fallen into a fault in the starry sky. It could be said that the cultivators of Dubby City were not in awe of the Ryuka, but Zhuowen. Since something happened to Zhuowen and the Ryuka did not have an extremely strong cultivator, they naturally did not have the support of the cultivators of Dubby City. At this moment, The dark mass of people on the east side of the square consciously parted to form a path. At the end of the path, 3 people slowly walked over. They were Shui Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Wu Dai. Luhan Tian was seriously injured, so Shui Xiaotian had arranged for him to stay in the hall. As for the trap formation outside the hall, it was removed by Dou Xian on the 3rd day. Dou Xian looked at Shui Xiaotian and the other 2 slowly walking over with a smile on his face. "You're finally here, my dear city lord." Shui Xiaotian was expressionless as he slowly walked to the bottom of the white jade platform. After telling Feng Xiao and Wu Dai to wait below, he stepped onto the white jade platform. Shui Xiaotian came in front of Dou Xian and said coldly, "Dou Xian, remember the oath you made in front of me 3 days ago?" Dou Xian raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, I swore to the heavenly Tao. Do you think I dare to go back on my words?" Shui Xiaotian nodded and then ignored Dou Xian. He turned his head and came to the edge of the platform. Facing the dark mass of people on the square below, he said loudly, "Today I, Shui Xiaotian, announce that I resign from the position of City Lord. I intend to hand over the new City Lord to Dou Xian. He is more qualified than me." Just as the City Lord conferring ceremony was in full swing, a stream of light swept over from the edge of the myriad magnet sea. It was a flying ship. Chapter 2248. Furion Dubby Square. The moment Shui Xiaotian abdicated and gave the City Lord position to Dou Xian, the crowd around the square burst into earth-shattering cheers. "Welcome, new City Lord!" Around the square, rows of soldiers in black armor knelt on one knee and bowed to Dou Xian, who was sitting on the throne on the high platform, to show their allegiance. Dou Xian looked at all of this silently, with a smug smile on his face. Shui Xiaotian, who was standing at the edge of the high platform, lowered his head slightly, his eyes full of helplessness. From the reaction of the crowd in the square, it could be seen that Dou Xian had completely controlled the soldiers of Dubby City for more than 10 years, and Shui Xiaotian knew nothing about it. Now that he saw the cheers of the soldiers below the high platform, his heart was full of helplessness, and he sighed. He knew that he was a failure as the City Lord of Dubby City. Dou Xian stood up and pressed his hands in the air. The cheering crowd around the high platform suddenly fell silent. All eyes were on Dou Xian. They were all waiting for him to continue. Dou Xian was very satisfied with the crowd's reaction. He clenched his right hand, and a terrifying divine power turned into a huge hand that grabbed at Shui Xiaotian. Shui Xiaotian did not expect Dou Xian to make a move, so he was not prepared. At this moment, Shui Xiaotian's face changed drastically. His reaction was fast enough, but he only took out a divine weapon to block in front of him. Puchi! The divine power hand slammed into his defensive divine weapon, and Shui Xiaotian flew out like a kite with a broken string. Blood spurted out from his mouth like a fountain, and he looked extremely miserable. Bang! Shui Xiaotian fell below the high platform, and the defensive divine weapon in front of him dimmed. He spat out another mouthful of blood. "Xiaotian, are you okay?" Feng Xiao immediately rushed over and helped Shui Xiaotian up, her beautiful eyes full of worry and anger. Shui Xiaotian had already given up the City Lord position, so why did Dou Xian still make a move and a sneak attack? He was too despicable. Dou Xian, you despicable and shameless bastard. You clearly promised the mayor that as long as he gave up his position, you would let the Ryuka safely leave Dubby City. Wu Dai said angrily. Dou Xian slowly walked to the edge of the high platform and looked down at Shui Xiaotian and the other 2. He said casually, "Yes, I did say that, and I even swore to the heavens that I would let the Ryuko off. However, I never said that I would let the old Castellan go. After I kill the old Castellan, I will naturally let all the Ryuko off." Dou Xian's gaze swept over the crowd on the square as he continued, "Whoever kills the old Castellan, Dou Xian will reward them handsomely, at least 1 grade 7 divine pellet." As soon as Dou Xian said this, the eyes of everyone in the square turned red. A level 7 divine pill was an extremely rare treasure. They might not even be able to obtain it in their dreams. Now that Do Xian had directly promised them a level 7 divine pill as long as they killed the old city lord. Who wouldn't do it? Kill. As long as we kill this Zhuo Xiaotian, we'll be able to obtain a level 7 divine pill. Go. That's right. Kill this Zhuo Xiaotian. What qualifications does a trash have to become a Castellan? He'd better die as soon as possible. All of a sudden, the eyes of the cultivators around the square turned red. One after another, attacks erupted from their hands. They were like dazzling fireworks that suddenly exploded out of thin air. It looked gorgeous and colorful. Zhuo Xiaotian roared angrily and poured all his divine power into his defensive divine artifact. A golden semicircle appeared around the three of them. At the same time, Wu Dai and Feng Xiao also took out their own defensive divine artifacts to protect themselves from the attacks coming from all directions. Pung pung pung. The dense sounds of collisions were incessant, and the dazzling explosions were multicolored, like bright and glistening flowers. There were simply too many people around the square. With so many attacks coming at them, even Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. It was extremely difficult for them to resist. Do Xian sat back on the throne and looked down coldly at Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two who were bitterly holding on under the attacks of the crowd. Back then, he had made a heavenly Tao oath to Zhuo Xiaotian, but he had made a small move in the oath. He had only let the other Ryuka people go, but not Zhuo Xiaotian. Moreover, even if he fulfilled the oath and let the other Ryuka people go, he would secretly send people to completely eradicate the Ryuka people to prevent future trouble. Do Xian knew very well that Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two wouldn't be able to hold on for long. In a while, Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two would be completely blown to smithereens by the attacks of the crowd. At this moment, hundreds of billions of kilometers away from Dubby City, surrounded by the Z-Way galaxy, a stream of light was flying over like a bolt of lightning. Its speed had reached an incredible level. After a while, the stream of light from hundreds of billions of kilometers away entered the range of the Z-Way galaxy and finally stopped in the starry sky outside Dubby City. The light faded away, revealing a flying ship that was as black as ink. The airship was not large. The hatch of the airship opened and a young man in snow-white clothes slowly stepped out. I've finally returned to Dubby City. I wonder how father and mother are doing, and what is Chun Shui doing now? The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a smile. Immediately, his powerful divine sense subconsciously swept towards Dubby City. Zhuowen's divine sense was now extremely powerful. A mere Dubby City was too small for his divine sense. He instantly swept through the entire Dubby City. However, the smile on the corners of Zhuowen's mouth quickly became extremely stiff, and his gaze became murderous. Do Xian, you're simply courting death. Zhuowen's eyes surged with murderous intent. He took a step forward and rushed towards the interior of Dubby City. At this moment, the defensive divine artifact released by Zhuo Xiaotian was getting dimmer and dimmer, but the surrounding attacks were getting stronger and stronger, as if there was no end to them. Bang! Finally, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the light shield, and it finally collapsed with a loud bang. Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their faces were pale and bloodless, and they were extremely weak. It seems that we're finished. Zhuo Xiaotian raised his head with difficulty and looked at the attacks whistling towards him. His eyes were filled with despair. Without the defense of the divine artifact, it was impossible for the three of them to resist such a terrifying attack. These attacks were enough to tear the three of them to pieces. There might not even be ashes left. The moment these attacks were about to hit Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two, a figure in fluttering white clothes suddenly rushed over and landed in front of them. Chapter 2249. Powerful, you all deserve to die. The white-robed youth said expressionlessly. With a wave of his right hand, the attacks that had been stationary suddenly changed direction and flew in the opposite direction. All of a sudden, screams could be heard all around the square. It was as if something extremely tragic had happened in this world. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, 50% of the cultivators around the square died on the spot, 30% were seriously injured, and the remaining 20% were more or less injured. After all, Zhuan wasn't returning the attacks to them. Instead, he was adding his own power to the attacks. That was why the attacks were so terrifying. Zhuo Xiaotian and the other two, who had been waiting for death with their eyes closed, immediately noticed the white-robed youth in front of them. Especially when they saw the white-robed youth's face, they were overjoyed. "Zhuan, you're back? You're finally back." Feng Xiao immediately stepped forward and hugged Zhuan, sobbing. When she heard that Zhuan had fallen into a fault in the starry sky, Feng Xiao was sad for a long time. This was her only son. Zhuan patted Feng Xiao's back to comfort her, while Zhuo Xiaotian came in front of Zhuan and patted him on the shoulder. He said with some guilt, "Zhuan, I've let you down. I didn't do a good job as the city lord of Dubby City." Zhuan shook his head and looked around, but did not see any Ryuka people. He said in a deep voice, "Father, where are the Ryuka people?" Zhuo Xiaotian said softly, "The Ryuka people are fine, but Han Tian, what happened to brother Han Tian?" Zhuan asked with a slightly changed expression. Han Tian was seriously injured by that bastard Do Xian, and the key to our treasury was taken away by Do Xian. Han Tian can't be treated, and his injuries are worsening. Do Xian forced your father to give up the position of city lord, and your father did so, but Do Xian still wants to kill your father. He's really abominable. Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. Zhuo Wen's gaze gradually turned cold. Soon after, he turned around and lifted his head to look at Do Xian, who was still seated on the throne on the white jade platform. A murderous intent suddenly swept out like a vast ocean. Do Xian frowned slightly, but he did not fear Zhuan at all. Although he was afraid of Zhuan back then, it was naturally because of Zhuan's strength. At that time, Do Xian's cultivation was only at the 6th stage of the void sky. But Do Xian's strength was different. Over the past 10 years, Zhuan's cultivation, he had directly reached the peak of the 7th stage of the void sky void realm. Therefore, Do Xian's self-confidence had swelled to the extreme, and he didn't even put Zhuan in his eyes. Even if Zhuan came over now, he thought that even if he wasn't a match for Zhuan, if he wanted to escape, Zhuan really couldn't stop him. Moreover, he was now the city lord of Dubby City and commanded such a huge force. If he gathered these forces, he might not be a match for Zhuan. After all, the current Zhuan was alone. How could he be a match for the entire Dubby City? Boom! The killing intent in Zhuan's eyes became more and more vigorous, and a terrifying aura swept out like a hurricane, blasting in all directions. Do Xian's pupils shrank. The pressure on him was too terrifying. It actually gave him the feeling of being crushed by a huge mountain, and he was like an ant that could be crushed in a powder by this huge mountain at any time. Bang! Suddenly, the white jade platform under Do Xian's feet shattered in a powder, and Do Xian fell from it in a rather sorry state. His legs were unstable, and he almost knelt on the ground. Zhuan slowly walked over, and the aura on his body became more and more terrifying. The entire square seemed to evaporate like water vapor, and the space distorted, blurring one's vision. Do Xian's legs trembled. Zhuan's aura was so oppressive that he almost couldn't breathe. Only then did Do Xian realize that Zhuan's strength was so strong. In other words, the current Zhuan's strength was much stronger than before. Die! Do Xian's eyes became fierce. He took out a black lotus from his spirit ring and threw it at Zhuan. The black lotus rapidly expanded, and black tentacles grew out of the black stamen. They wrapped around Zhuan's body, and in an instant, covered Zhuan's entire body. Do Xian stomped his right foot, turned into a stream of light, and fled out of Dubby City. Do Xian was very clear that with the powerful aura Zhuan had just displayed, the black lotus wouldn't be able to trap Zhuan at all. Unfortunately, Do Xian didn't escape for long. 2 sword lights suddenly rushed out from inside the black lotus and pierced a big hole in the black lotus. Do Xian felt the 2 sword lights behind him and suddenly took out a long black spear. With a shake of his hands, the long spear's black gas evaporated, and a lifelike huge black dragon condensed. The black dragon opened its mouth and swallowed the two sword lights. Its huge dragon tail suddenly swung and ruthlessly smashed the black lotus into powder. Unfortunately, just as the dragon tail was swung out, it was immediately caught by Zhuowen, who was inside the black lotus. "Come down for me." Zhuowen's right hand exerted force, and the black dragon was directly smashed to the ground. At the same time, two huge holes appeared in its body, and two sword lights rushed out from those holes again. Mother asterisk her, a mere 7th level void sky, cultivator dares to be so arrogant in front of this dragon lord? Today, this dragon lord will cripple you. Little blood disciple, come with me. Xiao Hei's somewhat unhappy voice came from the Thunderfire Sword, and the blood immortal sword behind the Thunderfire Sword quickly responded. Due to the urgency of the situation, it didn't flatter and attacked Dou Xian with a loud cry. Dou Xian's eyes were gloomy. He stabbed out with his spear, and the surrounding space was distorted, and strange crackling sounds came from it. The blood immortal sword cried out loudly, and for the first time, it became so bold and fierce, and actually collided with Dou Xian's long spear. Countless sparks flew, and the blood immortal sword cried out, and was sent flying by Dou Xian's spear. However, because of the blood immortal sword's powerful attack, Dou Xian's right hand trembled, and he couldn't help but retreat hundreds of steps. He looked at the blood-red divine sword in amazement. He was extremely shocked. This blood-red divine sword was only a divine weapon, and not only did it have such a highly intelligent sword spirit, but its power was probably no weaker than an ordinary 7th level void sky cultivator. Right now, Dou Xian was truly terrified. The divine sword that Zhuowen sent out actually had such terrifying power. Then what if Zhuowen personally took action? Wouldn't he be defeated immediately? While Dou Xian's imagination was running wild, the Thunder Fire Sword, with the power of thunder and fire, rushed over like a storm. Dou Xian came back to his senses and suddenly pointed his long spear. Suddenly, spear lights filled the sky and began to rotate counterclockwise, with a strange and terrifying power of distortion. "Trash," Xiao Hei said with extreme disdain. The Thunder Fire Sword suddenly slashed out, and the countless spear lights were completely shattered into countless pieces like paper. The power of thunder and fire was like a terrifying angry dragon, and it suddenly blasted in front of Dou Xian. Pucci. The moment Dou Xian came in contact with the power of thunder and fire, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He raised his long spear with both hands and resisted the power of thunder and fire with difficulty. How is this possible? This divine sword is even more terrifying than the blood-red divine sword? Dou Xian's eyes were full of shock. The power of the Thunder Fire Sword was too terrifying. It was probably comparable to an 8th level void sky cultivator. Chapter 2250. Rectification Bang. The Thunder Fire Sword slashed out once again. The terrifying thunder fire energy turned into an endless sea of thunder fire, filling the sky of Dubby City. A terrifyingly high temperature filled the air of Dubby City, and the surrounding air seemed to be distorted. Crack! Dou Xian raised his long spear, wanting to block the sword. Unfortunately, the moment it came into contact with the divine sword, the long spear was broken into two, and Dou Xian was smashed into the ground in an extremely miserable state. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was pale. "Lord Zhuo, don't kill me. I didn't do it on purpose." Dou Xian climbed up in a panic. His body trembled as he kowtowed to Zhuowen. Now he was truly afraid. The divine sword on Zhuowen's body had already put him in such a difficult situation. Moreover, to put it bluntly, the terrifying power displayed by the Thunderfire Sword was enough to kill him. As the owner of the two divine swords, one could imagine how terrifying Zhuowen's strength was. Therefore, at this moment, Dou Xian was really afraid. He kowtowed and begged for mercy in order to live. Zhuowen slowly came in front of Dou Xian. His right hand suddenly pressed down, and a surge of divine power poured out. Do Xian, who was kneeling on the ground and kowtowing, groaned and fell to the ground with his face down. I won't kill you now. With that said, Zhuan's right hand grabbed again, and the illusory sky bridge in Do Xian's body was pulled out. Then, with a pinch, the illusory sky bridge was instantly crushed into powder by Zhuan. No. Do Xian looked at the shattered illusory sky bridge, and he was stunned on the spot. A bone-chilling coldness that he had never felt before spread throughout his body. Do Xian knew very well that he was completely finished. With the illusory sky bridge destroyed, he would forever be a cripple, and his lifespan would become extremely short. Father, mother, I'll leave Do Xian to you, Zhuo said to Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao before leaping into the air and hovering above the square. Zhuo looked down at the entire Dubby city. His vast aura crushed down without holding back. Instantly, all the cultivators in Dubby city felt this terrifying aura. They trembled in fear, and their eyes were filled with fear. I, Zhuowen, have returned today. I heard that many people in Dubby city are very dissatisfied with my father as the city lord. They want my father to step down and recommend Do Xian to become the new city lord. You are not satisfied with us Ryuka ruling over Dubby city? Very well. Today I, Zhuowen, will take back everything that I, Zhuowen, have given you. Dubby city will be returned to you. As for the Ziwei galaxy and all the resources I brought, I, Zhuowen, will take them all back. As soon as Zhuowen said this, all the cultivators in Dubby city were in an uproar. One had to know that most of the cultivators in Dubby city joined mainly because of the huge energy and rich resources of Dubby city. But now, Zhuan actually wanted to take back all these resources. In that case, wouldn't they be left with nothing? Lord Zhua, please don't. You are still our respected lord. Dubby city needs you to be in charge again. Instantly, countless cultivators in Dubby city knelt on one knee and begged Zhuan not to take back the Ziwei galaxy and resources. Unfortunately, Zhuan turned a deaf ear to their pleas. He looked down at the crowd and sneered in his heart. None of these people were loyal to the Ryuka. They only valued the rich resources of the Ryuka, which could allow their cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. But once something happened to the Ryuka, these people were the fastest to change sides. Since Do Xian took away Zhuo Xiaotian's position as the city lord, none of these people stood up for Zhuo Xiaotian. They didn't even say a word of justice. It could be said that in Dubby city, except for the Ryuka, most of the people were cold-blooded. After experiencing these things, Zhuowen did not intend to set up Dubby city here. He wanted to take back all the things he had given Dubby city before. Get lost. Zhuowen only said this sentence, and a powerful divine sense swept out in all directions like a tide, driving away all the cultivators in Dubby city and even the Ziwei galaxy outside Dubby city. On Dubby city and the surrounding planets, cultivators were involuntarily chased out of the planets by an invisible force. They were in an extremely sorry state. Most of the cultivators did not know what was going on. They looked at the planets they lived on in surprise. When they wanted to re-enter the planet, they found that an extremely powerful energy barrier had appeared on the surface of the planet, preventing them from entering the planet. What's going on? Why are we being driven out of the planet? Many cultivators were in an uproar. They did not know what was going on, but soon Zhuan's voice rang in their minds. From now on, Dubby city is Dubby city, and the Ziwei galaxy is the Ziwei galaxy. I will take all the things that originally belonged to me, Zhuowen. All of you get lost. As soon as this voice finished speaking, a huge black vortex appeared in the sky above Dubby city in the center of the Ziwei galaxy. An unprecedentedly terrifying suction force came from the black vortex, and the planets around Dubby city were all sucked in by this suction force. In less than 10 breaths of time, the entire Ziwei galaxy was sucked into the black vortex. Other than the black mass of cultivators who were driven out of the Ziwei galaxy, there was only the lonely Dubby city in the center. Countless cultivators around Dubby city turned pale. They did not expect Zhuowen to be so ruthless as to take away the entire Ziwei galaxy. After taking away the Ziwei galaxy, Zhuowen came to the underground treasury of Dubby City. This treasury was built under Zhuowen's orders. It was mainly to store the countless resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the Luo God Palace ruins. Zhuowen did not even bother to use the key to open the door of the treasury. He directly punched the door open and entered the treasury. With a wave of his sleeve, he stored all the resources in the treasury into Devour's inner world. Although there were so many cultivators stationed in Dubby City over the past 10 years, and the consumption of resources was extremely huge, the resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the Luo God Palace were too much. Even though a lot of resources had been consumed over the past 10 years, it had only consumed 1/10 of the resources in the treasury. Of course, if another 100 years had passed, the resources in the treasury would have been consumed by the many cultivators in Dubby City. After collecting the resources in the treasury, Zhuowen returned to the square of Dubby City. At this moment, all the cultivators in the square had left, and most of the cultivators who were driven out of the Ziwei galaxy by Zhuowen had also left. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. His original idea was to accept those cultivators who were driven away by him if they were willing to stay. Chapter 2251. News from Muqinshu with Xiaodian, Feng Xiao, and a group of Ryuka clansmen gathered in Dubby Square. When the Ryuka clansmen saw Zhuowen, they all knelt on the ground and shouted his name. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and helped the Ryuka clansmen to their feet. He said indifferently, "I will find another place in the far west to settle down in the Emperor Star system. But from now on, the Ryuka forces will continue to develop, but they must be strict in accepting new members. There is no need to take in any random stray cats or dogs. Those fellows will only bite their masters." As he spoke, Zhuowen glanced at the dazed Dou Xian who had been thrown to the side by Zhuo Xiaotian and the others. At this moment, Dou Xian had nothing left to live for. The illusory heavenly bridge had been destroyed, and he had become a cripple. There was no difference between him and death. After Zhuowen finished speaking, the Ryuka clansmen all nodded in agreement. Zhuowen nodded, then said to Woody, "Woody, where is big brother Han Tian now? Brother Zhuo, come with me. Han Tian is in the conference hall." As Wu Dai spoke, she led Zhuowen to the conference hall at the top of the tower. Zhuowen carried Dou Xian and followed behind. After entering the hall, Zhuowen immediately noticed the weak Lu Han Tian lying on the side. His eyes immediately turned cold. Zhuowen threw Dou Xian to the ground, causing him to grimace in pain. He then went to Lu Hantian's side. After examining him, he found that although Lu Hantian's injuries were serious, they were not life-threatening. Letting out a sigh, Zhuowen took out a drop of Heavenly Domain Starry Sky essence from his spirit ring and fed it to Lu Hantian. After taking the Heavenly Domain Starry Sky essence, the originally unconscious Lu Hantian immediately woke up. Lu Hantian sat up abruptly, and then he saw Zhuowen beside him. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Zhuowen? I'm not dreaming again, right?" Zhuowen smiled slightly. Seeing Lu Hantian's confused expression, he explained everything from beginning to end. Lu Hantian came back to his senses. He let out a sigh and slapped his forehead. "So that's how it is. Your cultivation is really high now. You're already at the 6th Void Sky stage. And from the looks of it, you're even stronger than Dou Xian. I have to admire you." Zhuowen smiled, pointed. "Han Tian, brother, I brought the culprit. Since he was the one who seriously injured you, I'll let him deal with him. Han Tian, since he was the one who injured you. Lu Han Tian patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said, "Good brother." After saying that, Lu Han Tian came in front of Dou Xian. At this moment, Dou Xian's eyes were unfocused, and he didn't even look at Lu Han Tian. He was still silently grieving. Lu Han Tian lifted Dou Xian, then turned to Zhuowen and said, "Zhuowen, we'll see blood later. I'll take this guy out first, so he won't dirty the conference hall." Zhuowen nodded, and Lu Hantian carried Do Xian out of the conference hall. After a while, miserable screams came from outside. The blood-curdling screams continued for half an hour before coming to an abrupt end. Then Lu Hantian came in from outside. Zhuowen knew that Do Xian should have been completely dealt with by Lu Hantian. Zhuowen, what do you plan to do next? It wasn't easy for Dubby City to develop, and you're going to disband it just like that? Lu Hantian came in front of Zhuowen and said with a grin. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "The strength of a force doesn't depend on the number of people. It depends on whether the people of the force truly rely on the force and treat the force as their own home to develop. If the people of the force are all cold-blooded people who forget righteousness for the sake of profit, then I'd rather disband the force than continue to raise this group of vermin." Lu Hantian nodded. Ever since the news of Zhuowen's accident spread to Dubby City, he realized that the cultivators of Dubby City had gradually become arrogant. Especially Do Xian. He didn't even put the Ryuka and the city lord in his eyes. Especially when Do Xian forced Zhuo Xiaotian to abdicate. Other than the Ryuka, no one in Dubby City stood up for Zhuo Xiaotian. Instead, they immediately respected Do Xian. From this, it could be seen that the cultivators of Dubby City were all a group of people who changed their sails according to the wind. If such a person was accepted into a force, it would be a hidden danger. Then do you plan to not establish a force? Lu Hantian asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "We still have to establish a force, and it has to be established in the name of the Long family. However, the conditions for accepting people must be harsh and strict. Otherwise, what happened in Dubby City might happen again." Lu Hantian nodded and said, "I know." In the following period of time, Zhuowen reorganized Dubby City and left with the Ryuka. Regarding the matter of Mu Qinxue, Zhuowen asked Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao. At first, the two of them were hesitant, so Zhuowen didn't suspect anything. However, as time passed, he still didn't see Mu Qinxue. Zhuowen knew that something must have happened to Mu Qinxue. After settling the Ryuka on an uninhabited meteorite, Zhuowen finally met with Feng Xiao alone. "Mother, what happened to Qinxue?" Zhuowen looked at Feng Xiao seriously and asked. Feng Xiao hesitated, but seeing the serious look in Zhuowen's eyes, she sighed and said, "Wonder it's actually like this. After you left, Chan Shui." Listening to Feng Xiao's story, Zhuowen's eyes became more and more strange and shocked. According to Feng Xiao, Mu Qinxue seemed to have a very strange energy hidden in her body. This energy didn't have any abnormalities at first, but instead helped Mu Qinxue speed up her cultivation. Originally, Mu Qinxue's cultivation was only at the Void Sky first step, but in just a few years, her cultivation soared all the way to the Void Sky fifth step. Later, Mu Qinxue's strength became stronger and stronger, and Feng Xiao couldn't see through Mu Qinxue's true cultivation at all. Although Mu Qinxue's cultivation increased day by day, Feng Xiao found that Mu Qinxue's temperament had become completely different from before, and she could be alienated from her. At that time, Feng Xiao didn't know why Mu Qinxue had become like this, so she planned to personally talk to Mu Qinxue. She wanted to let Mu Qinxue speak out her thoughts and not feel so uncomfortable in her heart. But who would have thought that Mu Qinxue's temperament would change so much that she would actually attack Feng Xiao, almost killing Feng Xiao? If it wasn't for Mu Qinxue suddenly showing mercy and leaving Dubby City like a madwoman, Feng Xiao would have been a corpse by now. Moreover, when Mu Qinxue left Dubby City, there was a lot of movement, but at that time, no one noticed Mu Qinxue's departure, let alone intercepting Mu Qinxue. After listening to Feng Xiao's words, Zhuowen's eyes were full of disbelief. There was no doubt that what Feng Xiao said was really incredible. But Zhuowen knew that Feng Xiao was his mother, and she would never lie to him about this kind of thing. It was just that Zhuowen felt strange what happened to Mu Qinxue at that time. Chapter 2252. Entering waning and waning, Feng Xiao saw Zhuowen fall into deep thought. She opened her mouth, but did not say anything in the end. She knew that Zhuowen needed some time to calm down. "Mother, are there no clues about Qin Shui?" Zhuowen suddenly looked up and asked. Feng Xiao said with a bitter smile, Qin Shui was too strong back then and left without a sound. Even though Xian did not notice Qin Shui's departure, so Zhuowen knit his brows, but his heart was filled with shock. Dubby City was protected by an array, so even if Zhuowen wanted to leave Dubby City, it was impossible for him to do so without a sound. At that time, he would definitely touch Dubby City's array. But Mu Qinshui was able to leave without a sound. Even a 7-stage void sky cultivator like Dou Xian did not notice her and left. Just how strong did she need to be to do this? Qin Shui. Zhuowen suddenly took out the crystal ball that Magatama had given him. At this moment, the crystal ball was filled with images, and these images were the scenes of the battle between Great Brahma and the mysterious woman. When Zhuowen saw the mysterious woman's back in the images, he felt that this mysterious woman's back was very similar to Mu Qinshui's. But because this mysterious woman was too strong, being able to fight with a heaven domain master like Great Brahma, Zhuowen subconsciously felt that this mysterious woman could not be Mu Qinshui. But now that he heard Feng Xiao's words, Zhuowen looked at the mysterious woman's back in the crystal ball again. He found that this mysterious woman's back was too similar to Mu Qinshui's. Zhuowen's expression changed. The battle between Great Brahma and the mysterious woman had spread through the star field. But in the end, Great Brahma had returned to Great Brahma Palace to enter seclusion, and the mysterious woman had disappeared without a trace. In short, the mysterious woman was definitely doomed. Why does the woman's back in the crystal ball look like Qin Shui's? Could she be Qin Shui? Feng Xiao also saw the mysterious girl in the crystal ball and couldn't help speaking in a soft voice. Zhuowen put away the crystal ball and said with a sigh, "Whether she is Qin Shui or not, I'm not clear on that. Mother, let's take care of Ryuka first. You don't need to care about Qin Shui's matters, just leave it to me." Feng Xiao looked at the determination in Zhuowen's eyes and nodded without saying anything. In the following month, Zhuowen led the Ryuka to wander around the Sea of Magnets, searching for a suitable location to establish their forces. Finally, they found an incomparably massive meteorite in the northern part of the Myriad Magnetic Sea. Although the meteorite was overgrown with weeds and desolate, it was large enough. Zhuowen wasn't very picky. He had endless resources on him and could turn this barren meteorite into a prosperous area. It was only a matter of time. Under Zhuowen's leadership, the Ryuka settled down here. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the Emperor Star system from Devour's inner world and surrounded the meteorite. After doing this, Zhuowen spent a full 3 months in the periphery of the North Star system to set up the 9 revolving samsara array. Zhuowen had seen the power of the 9-cycle reincarnation array in the Bone World's Bone Halberd tribe. This kind of array was truly terrifying. The most important thing was that once Zhuowen laid down the array, all the cultivators inside would be under his control. No one would dare to act recklessly. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's level of array Dao was limited. Even though the Beast Bone array disc greatly increased his array Dao, he could only lay down the 9-cycle reincarnation array to the 8th level. There was still a gap between it and the peak 8th level array that Si Ling had laid down in the Bone Halberd tribe. However, the power of this array was enough. Even if a cultivator of the Void Sky 8 steps came to attack, Zhuowen would be able to withstand it without him. As for the powerful attacks of the Void Sky 9 steps, even if Zhuowen presided over it, it wouldn't last long. Fortunately, the 9-cycle reincarnation array still had room for improvement. When Zhuowen's array Dao improved in the future, he would be able to raise the level of the 9-cycle reincarnation array to the peak of the 8th level or even the 9th level. After dealing with the matters here, Zhuowen returned to the encampment and instructed Zhuo Xiaotian and the other Ryuka higher-ups. He also handed over the resources of the Luo God Palace to Zhuo Xiaotian before leaving. However, before he left, Zhuowen left Chao Tairan, Song Bin Hong, and Lu Manfeng to guard the Ryuka encampment. The 3 of them were the Void Sky 7 steps and wouldn't be of much help to Zhuowen right now. Therefore, he didn't plan to keep them by his side. Moreover, the three of them were Zhuowen's slaves. As long as Zhuowen didn't die, the three of them wouldn't have any thoughts of betraying him. As Zhuowen's slaves, Zhuowen only needed to use his divine will to kill the three of them without a doubt. As for Zhang Zicheng, Di Ling, and Chun Changsheng, he brought them with him. Zhang Zicheng was originally at the peak of the Void Sky 7 Steps and had enjoyed a lot of resources by Zhuowen's side. In addition, Zhang Zicheng's talent wasn't weak, so he didn't disappoint Zhuowen's expectations and broke through to the Void Sky 8 Steps. After leaving the encampment, Zhuowen went straight to the waxing waning moons. This time, he went to the waxing waning moons to find the Calamity Crystal Vein. Although his clone had become the Thunder Fire True God, compared to an expert like Lord Brahma, it was still insignificant. However, as long as Devour survived the storm, Zhuowen believed that even if he wasn't Lord Brahma's match, Lord Brahma wouldn't be able to kill him. If the mysterious woman was really Mu Qinxue, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let Lord Brahma go. However, he was still too weak right now. When his clone was stronger, he planned to go to the Central Universe and ask around. He knew that the Central Universe would have more information about the mysterious woman. Regardless of Mu Qinxue's whereabouts, Zhuowen knew the importance of strength right now. If the mysterious woman was really Mu Qinxue, Zhuowen would probably rush to the Lord Brahma Palace and find him to investigate Mu Qinxue's whereabouts. However, all of this required great strength. Zhuowen could only blame himself for being too weak right now. He was restricted everywhere. Outside the waning moons and waning moons were huge asteroids, each of which had a temporary encampment set up by cultivators. There were many entrances to the waxing waning moons. Almost every entrance was guarded by a force. If one wanted to enter, they had to pay the corresponding amount of divine stones. When Zhuowen entered the waxing waning moons, it was because the Emperor's spirit and Yao Xiong knew of a secret entrance. Therefore, they didn't enter from other entrances. The Calamity Crystal Vein was a precious treasure for true gods, but it was of little value to Void Sky cultivators. Zhuowen inquired around and found that there were many Calamity Crystal Veins in the waxing waning moons. However, they were scattered around. Moreover, the amount of Calamity Crystal Veins was not fixed. If one was lucky, there might be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Calamity Crystal Veins. If one was unlucky, there might only be a few thousand Calamity Crystal Veins. Chapter 2253. Iron Islands, this brother. Do you have a huge demand for disaster crystals? Suddenly, a young man with disheveled hair approached and asked softly when he saw Zhuowen asking about disaster crystal veins. Zhuowen turned to look at the young man with disheveled hair and found that the young man's aura wasn't strong, only around true God one calamity. He asked with interest, "Do you know where there are abundant reserves of disaster crystals?" When Zhuowen asked about disaster crystals, he had already restrained his aura and only revealed the aura of a true God two calamities. After all, if a Void Sky expert like him asked about disaster crystals, others would be suspicious. The young man quickly nodded and said, "Brother, come with me." After saying that, the young man brought Zhuowen to a huge meteorite nearby. "Brother, look over there. That group of people is from Iron Islands, and the man and woman in the lead are the children of the island master of Iron Islands. Their status is extremely noble," the young man said with a mischievous smile. "Iron Archipelago?" Zhuowen asked in surprise. "You don't know about Iron Islands?" Iron Islands is one of the most powerful rogue cultivator forces in the periphery of cloudy, clear, round, irregular region. They have a Void Sky expert guarding them and are in the limelight. The children of the two island masters of Iron Islands are very talented and are now true gods, three calamities, the young man said as he looked at Zhuowen in surprise. The young man suddenly said mysteriously, "Yes, brother, you don't know. Although there are many places with disaster crystal veins in cloudy, clear, round, irregular region, if there is only one place with abundant reserves, then the disaster crystal veins are almost all gathered together. This place is called Disaster Canyon, but its location is very mysterious. In addition, there are many dangers inside. Even void sky experts have fallen, so very few true gods are willing to enter Disaster Canyon. Moreover, void sky experts don't have much demand for disaster crystals, so it's impossible for them to take risks inside. Therefore, this place has become very useless. Zhuan's expression changed slightly, and he asked, "Do you know the map of Disaster Canyon?" The young man shook his head and said, "I don't know. Disaster Canyon itself is quite a secret, and it's useless for void sky experts, so there are very few maps of Disaster Canyon. I heard that the young island master of Iron Islands accidentally obtained the map of Disaster Canyon, and he is gathering people to go to Disaster Canyon." The young man looked at Zhuan round irregular region, and he looked God 3 calamities round irregular region, said, Brother, is God 2 true God 2 round irregular region?" Zhuan glanced at the young man. This young man's cultivation wasn't very strong. He was only a true God 1 calamity round irregular region. He probably looked for Zhuan because he wasn't confident in himself, so he wanted Zhuan to join the group. After all, he had a friend who was a true God 2 calamities round irregular region. The Iron Islands would definitely let him join because of this friend. Zhuan didn't expose the young man's purpose. He nodded and said, "Sure, let's join the Iron Islands group." Zhuan didn't have the map of disaster crystals on him. If he could follow the Iron Islands group into Disaster Canyon, then Zhuan would immediately leave the group and act alone. Seeing that Zhuan agreed, the young man beamed with joy and said, "That's great. My name is Fei. May I know brother's name?" "Longwen," Zhuan replied indifferently. Fei didn't mind Zhuan's cold attitude. Instead, he smiled and said, "Brother Long, let's go there and report together." Zhuan nodded, and the two of them arrived at the Iron Islands group. "The two of you are joining the Iron Islands group?" When Zhuan and Fei approached the Iron Islands group, the young island master's sister rode on a huge white wolf and walked in front of the two of them. Behind her were 2 guards in black armor. The woman was wearing a white woolen coat, and her fur fluttered in the wind. She had a unique charm. "Honorable Miss Hanlan, the two of us are willing to join the Iron Islands group and follow you to explore Disaster Canyon." Fei bowed to the woman and said with a smile. The woman in white didn't even look at Fei. Instead, she pointed at Zhuan and said, "You are qualified to join our group." The smile on Fei's face froze. He said anxiously, "Miss Hanlan, we came together. If my friend can join your group, I should be able to too." The woman in white didn't hold back and said, "You are too weak. You're not qualified to join our group. Get lost. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." Fei's face turned pale, especially when he saw the killing intent in the eyes of the 2 guards in black armor. He couldn't help but retreat. Zhuan extended his right hand and stopped the guards in black armor. "Brat, you dare stop us?" One of the guards in black armor looked at Zhuan with an unfriendly gaze. He suddenly pulled out the scimitar at his waist and slashed at Zhuan's head. Zhuan moved his right foot slightly and dodged the scimitar. Then, he punched the guard in black armor in the chest. Bang! The guard in black armor groaned and fell to the ground. His body twitched, and he was seriously injured. "How dare you?" The other guard in black armor snorted. He faced Zhuan but didn't attack. His strength was the same as the other guard in black armor. If the latter was defeated by the young man in front of him, there was no need to mention him. On the other hand, the woman riding on the white wolf's beautiful eyes flashed. She waved her hand and stopped the young man who pulled out the scimitar. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuan and said indifferently, "What is your name?" "Longwen," Zhuan said calmly. The woman in white was surprised by Zhuan's calmness. She smiled and said, "Do you know the price of injuring my subordinate?" "I don't know," Zhuan said straightforwardly. The woman in white chuckled and glanced at Fei, who was standing behind Zhuan. She said, "Since you are a friend, you can join the team as well." Hearing this, Fei's eyes were filled with surprise. He quickly bowed to the woman in white. Thump! Thump! At this moment, the young island master also rushed over on an even bigger white wolf. He looked at the guard in black armor, who was beaten to the ground by Zhuowen. He looked at the woman in white and said, "Hamlin, what happened?" The woman in white shook her head and said, "Nothing. Just now it was just a misunderstanding." The young island master nodded. Soon after, he took another look at Zhuowen before riding the white wolf to the center of the crowd. In a deep voice, he cried out, "Everyone, I've already gathered everyone. This time, the disaster canyon will be filled with difficulties. I hope that everyone is mentally prepared. I am the young island master of the Iron Islands, Lu Rufeng. I am here to warn everyone in advance that there is a high chance of dying in the disaster canyon. If you are afraid, you still have a chance to leave now. Otherwise, you will not have another chance." After Lu Rufeng finished speaking, he looked around and found that no one left. He smiled and said, "Okay, let's go. You two follow me. You are responsible for my safety in the disaster canyon. Do you understand?" Chapter 2254. Calamity Canyon. I've already told my brother. The two of you are my Imperial Guards. Remember to protect my life. Otherwise, you know the consequences. After entering the waning crescent, Lu Hamlin suddenly said something to Zhuowen and Fei, who were beside her. "Don't worry, Miss Hanlan. Fei will definitely risk his life to protect you." Fei immediately expressed his loyalty. Lu Hamlin didn't even look at Fei. Instead, she looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes were calm, and he just nodded. Seeing Zhuowen's calm expression, Lu Hamlin's beautiful eyes flashed with anger. She asked coldly, "What about you?" Zhuowen glanced at Lu Hamlin and nodded perfunctorily. He did not say much, which made Lu Hamlin even angrier. "Let's go." In the end, Lu Hamlin did not flare up. Instead, she said in a fit of pique and rode the white wolf to catch up with the team. Zhuowen laughed in his heart. This Lu Hamlin was like a child, without any scheming. It seemed that she had been spoiled since childhood. In this starry sky, where the strong preyed on the weak, an innocent girl like Lu Hamlin was rare. Although Lu Hamlin looked petty, Zhuowen had a good impression of her. If she were to encounter any danger after entering the disaster canyon, he could lend a helping hand. Especially once, a giant star beast broke through everyone's defense and rushed directly towards Lu Hamlin. Lu Hamlin was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale. However, Zhuowen took it down in advance, allowing Lu Hamlin to escape. Because of this, Lu Hamlin's attitude towards Zhuowen became extremely friendly and even somewhat concerned. Her brother Lu Rufeng's attitude towards Zhuowen also became better than before. However, Zhuowen was somewhat helpless. Since that time, Lu Hamlin had become more talkative. She would often talk to Zhuowen and even give things to Zhuowen. From Lu Hamlin's beautiful eyes, Zhuowen knew that this little girl had fallen in love. This made Zhuowen quite speechless. Didn't he just save this little girl once? Was it necessary for this little girl to fall in love with him? What Zhuowen did not know was that Lu Hamlin was not old. Moreover, this was her first experience and had not experienced any great storms. At that time, when the giant star beast rushed in front of her, she was most helpless and scared. However, Zhuowen saved her. It was also the first time in her life that she was saved by a strange man. In addition, Zhuowen was not bad-looking and had a unique and mysterious temperament. Unconsciously, Lu Hamlin was attracted to Zhuowen. They advanced in the starry sky for another half a month. In this half a month, the number of giant star beasts encountered was much less than before. Therefore, the team did not suffer any losses. Suddenly, Lu Rufeng, who was leading the way, raised his right hand and signaled the team to stop. He stopped in front of a huge rock wall and at the same time took out a map and frowned. Zhuowen could see clearly that this rock wall was clearly a camouflage. There was definitely another world behind the rock wall. From Lu Rufeng's reaction, this rock wall should be the entrance to the disaster canyon. However, Lu Rufeng did not see that the rock wall was hiding a camouflage. Thinking of this, Zhuowen went straight through the team and came in front of the rock wall. "Long one, what do you want?" Lu Rufeng looked at Zhuowen and said coldly, "This rock wall is just a camouflage. I think this is the real entrance." Zhuowen said and waved his sleeve. His right hand formed a seal and pointed out. After 3 breaths of time, the rock wall disappeared and a deep canyon entrance appeared in front of everyone. "You also know about arrays? Are you a divine array master?" Lu Rufeng saw the canyon entrance in front of him and was surprised. He immediately looked up and down at Zhuowen and asked in surprise. Zhuowen smiled and said, "I can't be called a divine array master. I only know a little about arrays." "Haha, not bad. After this trip to the Disaster Canyon, I will reward you handsomely." Lu Rufeng patted Zhuowen's shoulder and immediately raised his hand and led the team into the canyon. Liu Hanlin rode the white wolf to Zhuowen's side and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to be so secretive." "Miss Hanlin has never asked. You can't say that I'm secretive." Zhuowen cupped his hands and said indifferently. Liu Hanlin didn't seem to notice Zhuowen's distant attitude at all and said rather warmly, "Disaster Canyon should be even more dangerous. When the time comes, you must protect me well. You must not let me suffer any harm." Looking at Liu Hanlin's eager expression, Zhuowen was speechless. This girl was not afraid of death. After entering the canyon, the team from the Iron Islands became more cautious and Zhuowen followed behind silently. "Miss Hanlin, take this." Zhuowen took out a disc array and handed it to Liu Hanlin. Liu Hanlin took the disc array with a shy look on her face. She chuckled and said, "Why are you suddenly giving me something?" Zhuowen said seriously, "I'm afraid I need to leave for a while. This disc array contains a defensive array. If you encounter any danger, just activate the disc array." "What? You're leaving? Where are you going?" Liu Hanlin was stunned. As soon as she finished speaking, she realized that Zhuowen had disappeared. "Where's he?" Liu Hanlin looked around, but did not find any trace of Zhuowen. Shi Fei, who was on the other side of Liu Hanlin, could not help but shudder. He said with a trembling voice, "Miss Hanlin, Brother Longwen just disappeared into thin air. I don't even know what happened. He just disappeared in front of me." Liu Hanlin was shocked and fell silent. She was not stupid. From the scene of Zhuowen's disappearance, she could see that Zhuowen's origin was not simple. As for why someone like Zhuowen would follow their team, it was actually very easy to explain. He probably wanted to enter the Disaster Canyon, and the former did not have a map of the Disaster Canyon, so he followed their team. Gently stroking the disc array in her hand, Liu Hanlin revealed a self-deprecating smile. Zhuowen's disappearance did not attract the attention of the team. Chapter 2255. A familiar voice after leaving the group. Zhuowen's divine sense scanned the Disaster Canyon without restraint. What surprised Zhuowen was that the Disaster Canyon was huge. His divine sense could cover a large area, but he couldn't find the end of the canyon. However, what comforted Zhuowen was that the disaster crystal or vein in the Disaster Canyon was really rich. Within the range of his divine sense, he found hundreds of ore veins, and each vein had more than 1,000,000 pieces of disaster crystal organ. It had to be said that the amount of disaster crystal ore in the Disaster Canyon was huge. Zhuowen's divine sense also detected the Iron Islands team that had just entered the Disaster Canyon. The Iron Islands team was moving forward very cautiously, so their speed was naturally very slow. Zhuowen didn't know how far behind they were. Although it was said that the Disaster Canyon was extremely dangerous, Zhuowen didn't find any danger. Whoosh whoosh. 2 sword lights were summoned by Zhuowen. They were the Thunderfire Sword and the Blood Immortal Sword. "Kid, why did you call us out?" Xiao Hei sat on the sword hilt and said lazily, "Help me mine." Zhuowen said with a smile, "What? Mine?" Xiao Hei and the Blood Immortal exclaimed at the same time, "Yes, it's mining." Zhuowen nodded seriously and then told them about the Disaster Canyon. Only then did the 2 guys agree to help Zhuowen mine the disaster crystal or vein. Don't underestimate these 2 guys just because they were small in size, but they were definitely the best at mining. These 2 fellas had dug out a lot of mineral veins behind Zhuowen's back. Not to mention other things, blackened blood immortal had dug out the Heaven Devourer mineral vein hidden in the Devourer King's bone palace and devoured it. After instructing the two guys, Zhuan's gaze fell on the end of the canyon. His eyes flickered, and he finally decided to go to the end of the canyon. Zhuan's speed was not fast. Although his divine sense could not detect the danger in this place, his intuition told him that this was definitely not a good place. It would not be wrong to be careful. About 2 hours later, Zhuan stopped. His gaze fell on the front as a serious expression appeared on his face. At the end of the canyon, a rolling black fog blocked their line of sight. Zhuan also discovered that strange lightning arcs were faintly flashing within the black fog. They flickered brightly and were exceptionally conspicuous within the black fog. Moreover, when Zhuan's spiritual consciousness wanted to probe into the black fog, he discovered that his spiritual consciousness was blocked outside and could not enter at all. This place shouldn't be a good place, but there might be great treasures here. Zhuan's eyes flickered. This disaster canyon was definitely not simple, especially this black mist that gave him a very dangerous feeling. He felt that if he were to enter, he would definitely die without a burial ground. However, Zhuan still planned to go in and take a look. With Zhuan's current strength, as long as it was not a particularly terrifying expert, it would be very difficult to kill him. Even if the great Brahma Heaven personally came, Zhuan might not necessarily die. It could be said that he was already unknowingly standing in the ranks of the great Brahma domain's top experts. There were very few who could threaten him. Even if this black fog was a dangerous place, Zhuan believed that it should be enough to protect himself. Thinking of this, Zhuan waved his sleeve and summoned an ink-black imperial jade seal. It was the phagocytosis. During this period of time, he had been constantly refining the phagocytosis. He had already refined more than 2,000 restrictions, and their power had increased compared to before. The phagocytosis surged with ink-black energy that surrounded Zhuan, protecting Zhuan's safety. Bang! As soon as Zhuan stepped into the black fog, a series of banging sounds could be heard. Zhuan's pupils shrank. The moment he entered the black fog, terrifying lightning arcs greeted him like raindrops, but they were all blocked by the phagocytosis. What powerful lightning arcs! These lightning arcs should be enough to kill any cultivator below the 6th level of the Void Sky realm, right? Zhuan looked at the densely packed lightning arcs around him in shock. He was also quite shocked. Zhuan continued to follow the lightning arcs, and the deeper he went, the more terrifying the lightning arcs were. They were densely packed like the wrath of heaven. In the beginning, the phagocytosis could barely block the lightning arcs, but as he went deeper, the lightning arcs became too powerful. Zhuan had no choice but to use the power of faith to increase the power of the phagocytosis. Only then did the lightning arcs not break through the phagocytosis's defense. The lightning arc area was not long, but Zhuan felt as if he had entered a bottomless abyss. He walked in a daze for 4 hours before reaching the edge of the lightning arc area. When Zhuan walked out of the lightning arc area, his body sank, and he almost knelt on the ground. There was actually a gravity array here, and it was not a normal gravity array, but rather a supergravity array. Zhuan's main body was at the peak of the 7th level of the Void Sky realm, but he almost knelt on the ground. It could be seen just how powerful this gravity array was. Intruder, if you don't want to die, then scram. The moment he entered the gravity array, a cold voice sounded. It was the voice of a woman. However, when Zhuan heard this voice, his pupils couldn't help shrinking. This was because he was too familiar with this voice. It was Mu Qinshue's voice. Chen Shui, it's you. Are you here? I'm Zhuan. Zhuan said with an excited expression. Hong Long Long. As soon as Zhuan spoke, the lightning arc region behind him suddenly went berserk. After which, the densely packed lightning arcs fused together to form a huge lightning mouth that smashed toward Zhuan. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He reacted quickly and immediately sent out the phagocytosis, smashing it behind him. Pung! The phagocytosis slammed into the lightning arc mouth, but it only slowed it down. Then the phagocytosis was sent flying, but the lightning arc mouth did not slow down at all. It was a good thing that Zhuowen took advantage of the gap just now to escape the lightning arc mouth's attack range, causing the lightning arc mouth to miss. Chen Shui, I am Zhuowen. Why are you attacking me? Zhuowen slightly knit his brows. Although this voice was Mu Qinshue's voice, the tone of her voice was strange and filled with disgust. This made Zhuowen very confused. Scram. If you don't scram, I'll kill you. The cold voice sounded once again, but this time it was filled with a thick killing intent. Sorry, I must see you. I won't leave. Zhuowen's eyes suddenly became incomparably sharp. Mu Qinshue's disappearance had become a mystery in his heart. This time he had finally found a clue about Mu Qinshu. So how could he give up like this? Thinking of this, Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands. The phagocytosis suddenly expanded to several hundred feet and blasted at the lightning arc mouth without any hesitation. At the same time, Zhuowen took out the everlasting ice lotus. Instantly, the surrounding temperature plummeted, as if even space was about to be frozen by this terrifying cold air. Ever since the everlasting ice lotus swallowed the ice source, its power had increased by a lot. It was even more terrifying than a normal heaven-breaking divine artifact. However, Zhuowen's current cultivation was still too low, so he could not display the full might of the everlasting ice lotus. However, Zhuowen knew that once his cultivation increased, the everlasting ice lotus would become even more terrifying. After the phagocytosis stopped the lightning arc mouth, Zhuowen silently released the everlasting ice lotus onto the lightning arc mouth. Chapter 2256. Conflict? The cold voice exclaimed in surprise. Clearly, she was quite surprised that Zhuowen was able to break through her lightning mouth. The phagocytosis and the infinite ice lotus flew to Zhuowen's side and floated in the air, while Zhuowen stared firmly into the darkness ahead. He was sure that the owner of this voice was Mu Qinshu, but the latter couldn't recognize him. He also knew the reason. His mother had already told him the reason. Since he had found Mu Qinshu this time, Zhuowen would never give up this opportunity. He must see the Mu Qinshu with his own eyes. What happened to her back then? And was she the one who fought with Lord Brahma? If you don't want to die, it's best that you don't go forward. Otherwise, you'll regret it. The cold voice sounded again. Zhuowen shook his head and said in a deep voice, If I don't go forward and see you, I'll really regret it. As he spoke, Zhuowen's divine sense controlled the devouring seal and the infinite ice lotus to revolve around him, while he transformed into a stream of light that shot towards the depths of the mountain at an extremely fast speed. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after Zhuowen moved forward, a terrifying explosion sounded. Then, he discovered that at the end of the darkness, terrifying flames swept out. These flames were red in color. The flames were constantly converging and burning, forming the shadows of phoenixes. The moment he saw these flames, Zhuowen knew that the woman in the depths of the darkness must be Mu Qinshu. In today's world, besides his wife, Mu Qinshu, there was no second person who could possess phoenix flames. Zhuowen grabbed the infinite ice lotus with his right hand and suddenly threw it over. Immediately, the infinite ice lotus bloomed with beautiful petals. Ice blue cold air spread out in all directions, freezing the space. Bang, bang, bang. When the flames landed on the everlasting ice lotus, a series of explosive sounds rang out. Zhuowen was shocked to find that the everlasting ice lotus, which had always been successful, was actually showing signs of melting under the attack of the phoenix flames. What a terrifying flame! Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He had seen Mu Qinshue's phoenix flames before, and they weren't this terrifying. Even the everlasting ice lotus was showing signs of melting. Just how high did the temperature of these flames have to be? Moreover, even though he had the protection of the infinite ice lotus, Zhuowen could still clearly feel that the terrifying temperature coming from the surroundings made him feel as if he was in a furnace. Moreover, Zhuowen was still within the range of the everlasting ice lotus. If not for the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen would have been burned to ashes by the phoenix flames. Zhuowen's right hand pointed at the everlasting ice lotus, releasing all of its cold energy. The everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice. It was definitely the coldest thing in the world. Although the phoenix flames were terrifying, Zhuowen didn't believe that the phoenix flames could completely melt the everlasting ice lotus. Holding the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuowen's body was surrounded by phagocytosis. He faced the surging phoenix flames in front of him, and with a stomp of his right foot, he continued to move forward. Pata! Pata! As he continued to move forward, the phoenix flames became more and more terrifying, and the temperature reached an unprecedented height. Zhuowen's whole body was soaked in sweat. His face and ears were red, and his aura was like fire. The everlasting ice lotus in his hand began to melt, and a viscous liquid appeared on the crystal-clear ice lotus petals. It was the product of the melting of the ice lotus. However, Zhuowen also discovered that as the everlasting ice lotus melted, the origin of ice contained in the everlasting ice lotus seemed to be awakening. Although the everlasting ice lotus had absorbed the origin of ice, Zhuowen's strength wasn't enough to completely refine the everlasting ice lotus, so he naturally couldn't unleash the full power of the everlasting ice lotus. But now, because of the terrifying phoenix flames, the origin of ice in the everlasting ice lotus was triggered, and the origin of ice started to resist the phoenix flames. This also created an opportunity for Zhuowen to completely refine the ice origin. Back then, when he refined the everlasting ice lotus, he was stuck at the ice origin step. He had refined a part of the everlasting ice lotus, but when he wanted to refine the energy in the core of the everlasting ice lotus, the origin of ice would backfire on him. But now it was different. The origin of ice was trying its best to resist the phoenix flames, which gave Zhuowen a chance to take advantage of it. Although this opportunity was very risky. After all, during the refining process, if the ice source turned against Zhuowen in a life and death struggle, Zhuowen and the infinite ice lotus would be completely devoured by the phoenix flames and die. However, Zhuowen had his own backup plan. When the time came, he would release his clone, Devour. Since his royal bloodline had been awakened, Devour's body had become much stronger than before. Although the phoenix flames were terrifying, Devour's current body should be able to resist it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes sharpened. He controlled the phagocytosis to protect himself at all times. Then, he summoned the black-clad Zhuowen. As soon as the black-clad Zhuowen appeared, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of extreme flames. The terrifying temperature twisted the surrounding space and made it collapse. The extreme flames covered the everlasting ice lotus in an instant. The origin of ice, which was resisting the phoenix flames, sensed the threat behind it, and sent out a furious soul consciousness. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't care about the ice origin's emotions. Instead, he kept increasing the power of the extreme flames. As the extreme flames had opened a gap in the origin of ice, Zhuowen couldn't let the origin fill it. Shortly after, more than half of the origin of ice was refined by the extreme flames. The origin of ice transmitted a resentful soul consciousness. Then, it gave up resisting the phoenix flames and turned to deal with the extreme flames. Unfortunately, half of the origin of ice had been refined, and the remaining energy couldn't save it. It was just a matter of time before Zhuowen refined it. Swoosh! Without the obstruction of the ice origin source, the phoenix flames surged forward with a boom and enveloped Zhuowen. Zhuowen's real body waved his right hand, grabbing the everlasting ice lotus. Then, he entered Devour's body. At the same time, the black-clad Zhuowen showed his real body, which had golden scales, claws, and fangs. His golden eyes were bright and spirited. Since Devour had awakened his royal bloodline, his body wasn't as big as the entire star continent anymore. Now, he was only around 10 meters tall. Although Devour had shrunk in size, he was much stronger than before. Moreover, the scales on his body weren't black like before. Now they were golden. The phoenix flames covered Devour in just a blink of an eye. The terrifyingly high temperature twisted Devour's scales, but it couldn't break through Devour's scales. Although the flames were unable to break through the defense of the scales, the terrifyingly high temperature made Joie extremely uncomfortable. It was as if the blood in his entire body was burning. Chapter 22:57. The terrifying Mu Qinshu at the end of the Phoenix Flames was the entrance to a deep and serene cave. The flames were gushing out from this cave. Without a doubt, the owner of the cold voice from before was also in this cave. The moment Devour stepped into the cave, a wind-breaking sound came. Zhuowen's pupils shrank, and his golden right claw slammed behind him. Puff! Zhuowen felt as if his right claw had struck an incomparably vast mountain. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards, heavily smashing into the rock wall. Fortunately, Devour's body was strong enough. Although Zhuowen looked miserable, his injuries weren't too serious. Zhuowen's eyes fell behind him, and he saw a slim and graceful figure standing at the entrance of the cave. When Zhuowen saw this beautiful figure, his heart skipped a beat. He was too familiar with this beautiful figure. She was Mu Qinshu, King Devour's bloodline. No wonder you could get through my Golden Phoenix Flames passage and come to me. Mu Qinshu indifferently looked at Devour, who was shining with golden light, and said in surprise. Zhuowen slightly knitted his brows. Whether it was the appearance or temperament of the woman in front of him, she was Mu Qinshu. However, for some unknown reason, the Mu Qinshu in front of him gave Zhuowen a strange feeling. A black vortex appeared above Devour's head, and Zhuowen's main body walked out. Qinshu, I'm Zhuowen. Don't you remember me? Zhuowen stared at Mu Qinshu. Mu Qinshu's beautiful eyes narrowed, and she coldly said, I don't know you. I've warned you not to come in here and disturb me. Unfortunately, you're courting death. Don't blame me. Then, Mu Qinshu raised her jade-like hand and gently slapped forward. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He didn't sense any fluctuation from Mu Qinshu's palm. The palm was clearly still 10 meters away from him, but his perception told him that the palm had already landed on his chest. Bang! Devour reacted quickly, immediately standing in front of Zhuowen. He opened his mouth and released the devouring vortex. Unfortunately, although the palm seemed weak, the moment it touched the devouring vortex, the vortex twisted and collapsed, shattering into countless pieces. The soft and powerless palm landed gently on Devour's chest. Puff! Devour spat out a mouthful of blood. His chest caved in, and the hard golden scale shattered, revealing his red flesh. Blood gushed out like a fountain. It was a ghastly sight. The power of the heavenly path. Zhuowen's main body reacted quickly. He waved his sleeve, and a powerful divine power pulled Devour back. He looked at Mu Qinshu seriously. The palm Mu Qinshu had just used wasn't simple. It wasn't the power of the starry sky. The power of the starry sky was nothing to Zhuowen. Only the power of the heavenly path, which was above the power of the starry sky, could produce such an elusive palm. However, the power of the heavenly path that Mu Qinshu had displayed wasn't strong. It was even weaker than the heavenly path blood in Zhuowen's body. However, Mu Qinshu's use of the heavenly path had reached the acme of perfection. Although the power of the heavenly path blood she had mastered was very subtle, it could be more powerful if she used it well. Worthy of being Devour King's bloodline. Your body is so tough. Anyway, I wonder if you could take my next palm? Mu Qinshu's beautiful eyes flashed with a cold gleam. Her jade-like palm struck again, using the power of the heavenly path. Although the palm looked ordinary, it was elusive and elusive. Zhuowen's face changed slightly. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis. At the same time, he poured all the faith energy in the small temple into the phagocytosis. The power of the phagocytosis reached an unprecedented level. Boom! The phagocytosis and Mu Qinshue's jade-like palm collided. The power of the heavenly path blood exploded, turning the surrounding starry sky into a barren void. The space collapsed and ceased to exist. The phagocytosis was blown away. Zhuowen vomited a mouthful of blood. He was severely injured. However, he immediately took out a drop of the heavenly domain starry essence and adjusted his body to its peak state. Holding the phagocytosis in his hand, he looked at Mu Qinshui in front of him with a solemn expression. Mu Qinshui took a few steps back. A drop of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Her face was as pale as snow. "You're injured?" Zhuowen looked at Mu Qinshui in surprise. He knew very well that with his strength, it was impossible for him to injure Mu Qinshui, who had grasped a trace of the heavenly path blood. It should be known that the woman in front of him was most likely a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert. Even if Zhuowen's Devour clone had awakened the royal bloodline and had many trump cards, it was already amazing that he could survive against a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert, let alone injure one. The coldness in Mu Qinshui's beautiful eyes deepened. With a cold snort, she waved her jade-like hand. Suddenly, the surrounding laws became chaotic. Zhuowen even felt a sense of suffocation and powerlessness. This feeling was similar to drowning, helpless and lonely. Zhuowen knew that Mu Qinshui was using the heavenly path blood to control the surrounding laws of the starry sky to attack him. In front of this kind of power, as long as Zhuowen didn't have the strength comparable to the heavenly path blood, it would be difficult for him to break free and resist. So what if I'm injured? You, who can't grasp the heavenly path blood, are like an ant in front of me. Mu Qinshui slowly walked over. Her beautiful eyes were filled with indifference and killing intent. Zhuowen turned his head with difficulty. Looking at Mu Qinshui, who was getting closer and closer, he was finally shocked. He had always thought that Devour, who had awakened the royal bloodline, could escape from a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert, even if he wasn't as strong as a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert. But now, he realized that he was gravely mistaken. The heavenly path blood was above the starry sky blood, and a Void Heaven Ninth Step expert who had grasped a trace of the heavenly path blood had absolute control over the starry sky blood. In other words, even a peak Void Heaven 8-step expert was no different from an ant in front of a Void Heaven 9-step expert. For a Void Heaven 9-step expert, killing a Void Heaven 8-step expert was easier than killing an ant. "Oh!" Devour roared. The blood in his body boiled, and a gold mist gushed out. Devour, who was suppressed to the point that he couldn't move, suddenly leaped up, grabbed Zhuowen, and fled to the side. Boom! The moment Devour left, Mu Qinshui's attack came, smashing the rock wall into smithereens. As expected of King Devour, using a secret technique, you can actually break free from the starry sky blood, but you can't run far. The corners of Mu Qinshui's mouth curled into a cold smile. Her jade-like foot kicked the ground as she chased after Devour. With the power of the heavenly path blood, Mu Qinshui's speed was absolutely terrifying. Coupled with the fact that Devour had used a secret technique, he was extremely weak. It didn't take long for Mu Qinshui to catch up to him. Boom! Mu Qinshui lightly punched out with her right palm. The surrounding starry sky blood obeyed her command, forming a terrifying pressure. Devour's speed immediately slowed down. At the same time, Mu Qinshui's right palm landed heavily on Devour's body. Chapter 2258. Using the Great Path, this was definitely the most serious injury Devour had ever received, especially after he had awakened his royal bloodline. It should be noted that Devour, who had awakened his royal bloodline, was very intimidating. Zhuowen had experienced it when he was on the uninhabited planet. At that time, Yang Zhonghui had used a secret technique to escape. Devour had only needed to condense a golden claw to smash her into powder. But now, in front of Mu Qinshui, Devour was simply an ant. He was defeated with a flip of her hand, cutting an extremely sorry figure. Who are you after all? Zhuowen's real body struggled to get up from Devour's side, glaring at the beautiful woman in front of him. He knew that the woman in front of him was wearing Mu Qinshue's disguise, but she was someone else on the inside. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you have to die. Mu Qinshu sauntered over, reaching out her slender hand. A wisp of the Great Path's principle jumped out from Mu Qinshue's fingertip like a lively little elf. At the same time, the moment the power of the heavenly Tao became active, the surrounding starry sky laws seemed to come alive. They suddenly exploded, and like a sturdy rope, they bound Zhuowen with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Devour's injury was too severe. Moreover, Zhuowen's real body was bound by the principles of the starry sky. Thus, Zhuowen didn't have time to take out the heavenly star essence from his ring to help Devour recover. Mu Qinshu apparently knew that Zhuowen had the heavenly star essence. Thus, she had bound Zhuowen's real body immediately. Originally, if you didn't come after me, I would have given her face and not killed you. However, you don't know what's good for you and actually came to me. That's fine. I warned you to leave, but you still didn't listen. If you want to die, I won't care about her face anymore. After I kill you, she won't have a chance to turn the tables. At that time, I'll be me, and she won't have a chance to wake up. Mu Qinshu approached him step by step. She wasn't in a hurry to kill Zhuowen. Instead, she mumbled something inexplicable. Zhuowen immediately realized that Mu Qinshu might be the real Mu Qinshu, and the woman in front of him wasn't his wife, Mu Qinshu. Of course, Zhuowen still had no idea what had happened to Mu Qinshu. The only thing he was certain of was that Mu Qinshu, who had appeared before him, wanted to kill him. Mu Qinshu stopped in front of Zhuowen and silently looked down at him. Her jade-like hand reached out and slowly approached him. Mu Qinshue's movements were gentle, as if she wanted to caress Zhuowen's forehead. However, Zhuowen's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He could clearly sense the killing intent in Mu Qinshue's eyes, as well as the terrifying heavenly Tao Law energy in the jade hand that was about to reach his forehead. He knew very well that this seemingly soft and powerless hand actually contained a terrifying strength. So long as this hand came close to his forehead, then he, Zhuowen, would definitely die. Under the threat of life and death, Zhuowen became even calmer. He lifted his head and gazed at the hand. More precisely, he wasn't looking at the hand, but at the heavenly Tao principle energy condensed in it. It wasn't the first time that Zhuowen came in contact with the heavenly Tao principle. He had obtained the heavenly Tao blood in the Luo God Palace ruins. Later on, when Devour was crossing the 20th fire, a wisp of the heavenly Tao principle descended. Moreover, because he had the heavenly Tao blood, he would often take it out to comprehend. However, his realm wasn't high enough, so he hadn't been able to comprehend the heavenly Tao principle in the heavenly Tao blood. After all, Zhuowen's original body hadn't even reached the 8 steps void sky. He hadn't comprehended the entire starry skies principle. The heavenly Tao principle was too far away for him. But today, Mu Qinshu had used the heavenly Tao principle energy again and again. Zhuowen had also witnessed the former using the heavenly Tao principle energy with his own eyes. Originally, he didn't understand the heavenly Tao principle, but at this moment, he seemed to understand and comprehend it. He indeed couldn't comprehend the heavenly Tao principle, but he had the heavenly Tao blood. If he grasped the method to use the heavenly Tao principle energy, he might be able to use the power of the heavenly Tao blood. Back then, he was a blind man groping for an elephant, so the heavenly Tao blood was of little value to him. But now, someone was using the heavenly Tao principle energy in front of him. It was like a peerless swordsman dancing with a sword in front of you. Although you didn't understand the sword art and didn't know the name of the sword art the swordsman was dancing with, you could imitate it and dance with the sword in your hand. Of course, the premise was that you had a sword in your hand. The heavenly Tao blood was the sword in Zhuowen's hand. At this moment, Mu Qinshu, who was using the heavenly Tao principle energy in front of Zhuowen, was that peerless swordsman. Although Zhuowen didn't know anything about the heavenly Tao principle energy, he could imitate it because he had the heavenly Tao blood. Move for me. Zhuowen let out a low roar, and a thin needle of death energy hidden in his spiritual space shot out. At the same time, more than 6,000 divine soul galaxies in his spiritual space exploded and shattered. An unprecedentedly terrifying power, like a ripple, suddenly burst out from Zhuowen's body and blasted away the heavenly Tao principle energy around him. The thin needle of death qi silently shot towards Mu Qinxue. Although the thin needle of death qi was powerful, Zhuowen knew that it was useless against an expert like Mu Qinxue. However, it could delay her for a while. Sure enough, Mu Qinxue frowned slightly. Her jade-like palm changed. She pinched her fingers together and gently flicked them. The thin needle of death qi was blocked by an invisible force. However, the thin needle of death qi was not simple. Its powerful death qi had a terrifying withering property. The invisible force had only touched the thin needle for a short while before it was contaminated by the death qi and collapsed. The moment Mu Qinxue dealt with the thin needle of death qi, Zhuowen immediately took out the heavenly domain starry sky essence from his spirit ring and took a drop to restore his shattered divine soul. After his divine soul was restored, Zhuowen took out the heavenly Tao blood from his spirit ring and recalled the method Mu Qinxue used to control the heavenly Tao principle. He took out a drop of the heavenly Tao blood and began to drive it according to the method. It had to be said that the power of the heavenly Tao blood was terrifying. The moment Zhuowen took out the heavenly Tao blood, his right hand was almost distorted as if it would be annihilated into nothingness by the terrifying power of the heavenly Tao blood at any time. However, as Zhuowen continued to form seals according to Mu Qinxue's method, the destructive power became much more docile, and his distorted hand gradually recovered. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He did not expect that he could drive the power of the heavenly Tao blood according to Mu Qinxue's method. At this moment, Mu Qinxue had destroyed the thin needle of death qi, and she also noticed the movement on Zhuowen's side. Chapter 22:59. Escape. You actually have the heavenly blood? No, this aura is so familiar. It belongs to me, you thief. Mu Qinxue's beautiful eyes were gloomy. She no longer had her previous calmness. With a shout, her jade-like palm blasted towards Zhuowen like a gust of wind. Zhuowen's gaze was solemn as he suddenly activated the drop of heavenly law blood. The heavenly law energy within the drop of heavenly law blood was like a spider web as it densely spread out in all directions. Boom! Mu Qinxue's jade-like palm blasted the drop of heavenly blood. Instantly, the insignificant drop of heavenly blood exploded into countless small drops of blood, spreading out in all directions. The heavenly Tao's power condensed in the heavenly blood exploded like a bomb, constantly expanding and finally erupting with a shocking power. Mu Qinxue let out a muffled groan and couldn't help but retreat dozens of steps. She was already injured, and this time, when she collided with the heavenly blood's power, her injuries naturally worsened. Zhuowen was even more unbearable. Blood mist burst out from his body as he was sent flying. However, the moment he was sent flying, he waved his sleeve and immediately put Devour into his spirit ring. He then quickly swallowed a drop of heavenly domain star essence, unfolded his torch dragon wings, and immediately left this place. Now, Zhuowen knew that with his current strength, it was impossible for him to be Mu Qinxue's opponent. If he continued to stay here, he would only be killed. Although he wanted to personally take Mu Qinxue away, he knew that he didn't have the ability to do so. Although he was unwilling, he had to make this decision. Only when his strength was comparable to Su Tianjiodong's, he would come here again to take Mu Qinxue away and ask her what had happened. Mu Qinxue didn't continue to chase after him. Instead, she stopped in place, her beautiful eyes looking at the departing figure with a complicated expression. You really don't have to worry about letting me control the body. You know my character. If this guy didn't use the power of the heavenly blood, I would definitely kill him. A voice filled with vicissitudes of life came from Mu Qinshue's body. It was also a woman's voice, but it was low and hoarse. Mu Qinshue's beautiful eyes were calm as she said, "If you dare to make a move, I guarantee that you will never be able to take revenge. At that time, your strength will also be greatly weakened." The voice fell silent and said with a complicated tone, "Then why did you ask me to do that? Don't you love your husband very much? Don't you want to stay by his side?" Mu Qinshu laughed self-deprecatingly. "I don't trust you. I can't stay awake at all times, and you're too strong. If I'm by my husband's side, and I can't control you, then my husband and the entire Ryuka would be finished. Also, don't forget your promise." The voice fell silent once more, and then it smiled and said, "What a cautious little girl. Don't worry, so long as you don't disturb me when I'm taking revenge. All right, we've pretty much finished collecting all the Heaven Dao energy hidden in Calamity Gorge. Let's go." After she finished speaking, Mu Chan Shui stomped her foot. Dense ripples appeared under her feet, and she disappeared from the spot. In the black fog of Disaster Canyon, a sorry figure suddenly appeared. Zhuowen turned around to look at the black fog and found that Mu Qinshu did not chase after them. He slightly knit his brows and secretly sighed in his heart. What happened to Qinshue's body? Why did she become like this, and why did her strength become so terrifying? Zhuowen bitterly said to himself, "I have to become stronger. Perhaps Lord Brahma knows something about this." Zhuowen's eyes became firm again. He was certain that the mysterious girl who fought with Lord Brahma was no one else but Mu Qinshu. He knew that Mu Qinshu did not chase after them and would definitely leave. At that time, he would lose contact with Mu Qinshu again. But this was a helpless move. Not to mention that he was not Mu Qinshue's match. Even if he was, he would not be able to keep Mu Qinshu here. With Mu Qinshue's current terrifying strength, unless he was stronger than Lord Brahma, it would be a fool's dream to keep Mu Qinshu here. After all, Lord Brahma had fought with Mu Qinshu, but in the end, Lord Brahma went into closed-door cultivation and Mu Qinshu did not die. The difference in strength between the two was not that big. Of course, Zhuowen knew that the current Mu Qinshu was not his wife, but someone else who was controlling his wife's body. No matter which possibility it was, Zhuowen was still not strong enough. He could not keep Mu Qinshu, which meant that the clues about Mu Qinshu were cut off again. And the only clue at present was probably Lord Brahma. It was just that he was still too weak and was not on the same level as Lord Brahma. If he went to Lord Brahma Palace now, it would be impossible for Lord Brahma to treat him as an equal, let alone get Lord Brahma to tell him about the mysterious girl. "I have to become stronger. I'm still not strong enough." Zhuowen sighed softly and left this place. In the middle half of Disaster Canyon, an earth-shattering roar came from it. In front of the canyon, everyone on the Iron Archipelago stopped in their tracks and looked at the two sides of the canyon in horror. In front of them, disaster crystal veins were dug out like long black dragon skeletons. Every vein was a supreme grade vein, and the reserves of disaster crystal veins were extremely rich. The ones who dug out so many disaster crystal veins were not the people on the Iron Archipelago, but two very inconspicuous divine swords. "Hey, all of you, get out of here. If you dare to touch these veins, I'll cut you down immediately." The blood celestial sword floated above the people on the Iron Archipelago and said arrogantly. Everyone lowered their heads submissively and naturally didn't dare to say a word. As long as they were not fools, they could see that the two divine swords were much more powerful than them. To put it bluntly, anyone with the two divine swords could easily slaughter their entire team. "Brother, what should we do? Most of the veins in Disaster Canyon have been dug out by these two divine swords." Lou Hanlon came to Lou Roofing's side and said timidly. Lou Ruffing sighed softly and said, "We can't do anything. These two divine swords are too powerful. The owner of such powerful divine swords must be an almighty figure. We'd better know our place. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll be killed." Lou Hamlin nodded and looked a little depressed. Lou Ruffing saw Lou Hamlin's depression and said with a frown, "Are you thinking about Longwind? Don't think about him. Since he's not in the team, I'm afraid he died somewhere. This disaster canyon is not a good place." Lou Hamlin did not speak. She saw Longwind disappear in front of her with her own eyes and gave her a formation plate, saying that it could protect her. She told Lou Ruffing about this, but Lou Ruffing did not believe her at all. He concluded that Longwind died on the way. "I know about this. Brother, why don't we retreat? These two divine swords are not to be trifled with," Lou Hamlin said with some worry. Lou Ruffing looked ahead with some reluctance. He had only dug out one disaster crystal vein after entering this place, and it was of relatively poor quality. The rest were basically taken by the two divine swords. However, Lou Ruffing also knew that he could not compete with the two divine swords. He sighed and said, "Let's go." Chapter 2260, The Surprise Attack, Brother. Lou Ruffing fell to the ground from the White Wolf. Lou Hamlin screamed and immediately got down from her horse to check on Lou Ruffing's injuries. The surrounding cultivators of the Iron Islands were also shocked. A few of Lou Ruffing's bodyguards got down from their horses and rushed to Lou Ruffing's side. One of them pulled out an arrow that was nailed to the ground and said, "Iron Hook arrow. It's the work of those bastards from the Iron Hook Island." Cough. Lou Ruffing spat out a mouthful of black blood. His face was covered in black gas, which made him look ferocious and terrifying. "It's poisonous. What should we do?" Lou Hamlin's pretty face changed. Lou Ruffing was a true God, 3 disasters expert, but he couldn't withstand the poison. It showed how terrifying the poison was. Just as the Iron Islands were in a daze, the sound of arrows whizzing through the air could be heard. They were densely packed and swept toward the Iron Islands team in an instant. Wretched cries rang out from the group. The arrows were too concentrated. Add to that the fact that the Iron Archipelago's cultivators were in a daze. More than half of the cultivators were hit. Moreover, the arrows contained terrifying poison. Even Lou Ruffing, a true God, 3 disasters, couldn't withstand the poison, let alone the other cultivators of the Iron Islands team. Lou Hamlin was lucky. More than 10 loyal cultivators of the Iron Islands were protecting Lou Hamlin and Lou Ruffing, so Lou Hamlin was unharmed. However, only 2 or 3 of the loyal cultivators were left after the rain of arrows. It was impossible for them to protect Lou Hamlin and Lou Ruffing from the next wave of arrows. At this moment, the Iron Islands team was utterly defeated. Only about 30% of them were left. The rest were either shot in the heart by the rain of arrows or killed by the poison. The remaining cultivators of the Iron Islands were in despair. They knew that they couldn't withstand the next wave of arrows. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A team appeared at the entrance of the disaster canyon. At the front of this group, a young man dressed in a dark green robe was riding a large white horse, slowly approaching. Behind the young man were soldiers with bows and crossbows aimed at them. If the Iron Archipelago made any strange movements, these archers would not hesitate to fire their arrows. The young master of Iron Hook Island, Jiangjia. Lou Hamlin stared at the young man riding on the white horse, her beautiful eyes spitting fire. The young man named Jiangjia looked at Lou Hamlin and said with a smile, "So, it's the little princess of the Iron Islands." "Aya, I'm really sorry. I thought that the disaster canyon was full of danger, so I fired an arrow just in case. I didn't expect to hurt your team. I'm really sorry." Lou Hamlin was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Jiangjia's words were definitely meant to provoke her, but Lou Hamlin did not dare to flare up. She was very clear that the situation was pressing and she had to remain calm. "Jiangjia, since it was an unintentional mistake on your part, we won't pursue it any further. Now, we plan to leave the disaster canyon. Please make way for your team," Lou Hamlin said calmly. But Jiangjia did not seem to have heard it. The corners of his mouth revealed a mocking smile as he said, "Miss Hamlin, what's the hurry for? I've heard of Miss Hamlin's beautiful name. Why don't you come with me to Ironhook Island? Lou Hamlin's beautiful face changed greatly. This Jiang Jia was too shameless. He was trying to take her, Lou Hamlin, hostage. In your dreams, Lou Hamlin said coldly. Jiang Jia's face gradually darkened. He grinned and said, "Since Miss Hamlin doesn't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for killing them all." With that, Jiang Jia waved his right hand. The archers behind him immediately drew their bows and arrows. The cold light reflected from the tip of the arrows was particularly frightening. Miss Hamlin, quickly surrender and do as Jiang Jia said. Otherwise, we'll all die. Suddenly, the remaining 30% of the Iron Islands cultivators, under the threat of death, turned their heads and glared at Lou Hamlin. Lou Hamlin's beautiful face turned pale. She could not help but kneel on the ground and look at her team members in disbelief. Jiang Jia, who had planned to kill the Iron Islands cultivators, saw this scene. He raised his hand slightly and motioned for the archers behind him to stop shooting. Then he looked at the Iron Islands in front of him with a mocking gaze. Interesting. If any of you can capture your beloved Miss Hamlin, then I'll spare his life. Jiang Jia joked. As soon as these words came out, all the cultivators of the Iron Islands cultivators focused their eyes on Lou Hamlin. Feeling the burning and murderous gazes, Lou Hamlin's face turned pale. She shouted, "Don't forget that you're from the Iron Islands." Miss Hamlin, are you joking? We can't even keep our lives. What's the point of talking about the Iron Islands? One of the cultivators in the team sneered. Lou Hamlin looked and found that the person who spoke was Shifei. Go. Shifei looked at Lou Hamlin's eyes without any guilt. He kicked his right foot and rushed toward Lou Hamlin. The rest of the cultivators also rushed forward. There were only 2 or 3 of them who were loyal to the Iron Islands. Moreover, they were seriously injured in the wave of arrow rain just now. Therefore, they did not last long before they were killed by the crowd. Lou Hamlin looked at the ferocious faces rushing toward her. She could not help but think of Long Wen's face. She took out the last formation plate that the man left for her and murmured softly, "I believe that you're a good person." After saying that, he threw the formation plate out. The formation plate's surface burst with a blazing light. Then, waves of strong ripples swept out from the formation plate. Boom, boom, boom. The cultivators who rushed over were caught off guard, and all of them crashed into the ripples. There was a dull and ear-piercing sound. Then, the cultivators who crashed into the ripples all exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They could not be more dead. Seeing that the cultivators in front of them had died, many of the cultivators at the back made a prompt decision and stopped. Unfortunately, the ripples were not static. They were like rings of light that suddenly spread out. The cultivators at the back who wanted to retreat did not last long under the spreading ripples and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. In just 3 breaths, the cultivators from the Iron Islands who wanted to capture Lou Hamlin were all wiped out. Naturally, Shifei was among them. Lou Hamlin looked at the scene in a daze. She did not expect that the formation plate that Zhuowen left for her would contain such terrifying power. None of the cultivators on the Iron Islands could resist the ripples released by the formation plate. Jiang Jia was dumbstruck. He could not help but take a few steps back in fear. Chapter 2261, The Unlucky Jiang Jia. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As soon as she finished speaking, arrows pierced through the air like fuses, forming a dense rain of arrows that shot towards Lou Hamlin. However, when the rain of arrows came into contact with Lou Hamlin, they were affected by the terrifying ripple and exploded into countless pieces. Moreover, due to the stimulation of the rain of arrows, the ripples suddenly became violent and rushed towards Jiang Jia's group like a flood. Jiang Jia naturally saw this scene and immediately turned his horse around and fled at full speed. The ripple gave him the aura of death. He knew that if he did not escape, his fate would be the same as the cultivators of the Iron Islands, exploding into a cloud of blood mist. As soon as Jiang Jia left, his group immediately fell into chaos. Moreover, the speed of the cultivators in the group was naturally not as fast as Jiangjie, so the ripple quickly caught up to them. A cloud of blood mist exploded, and the smell of blood immediately spread throughout the canyon. In an instant, the group that Jiangjie brought along was completely annihilated. As the leader of the group, Jiangjie was currently fleeing in panic. Unfortunately, although the speed of the white horse he was riding was fast enough, it was still not as fast as the ripple that spread out from the array disk. The moment Jiangjie was about to rush out of the Disaster Canyon's entrance, the ripple floated past his body. Immediately, Jiangjie and the white horse he was riding exploded into a cloud of blood mist. They were dead. Lu Hanlin looked at the scene in shock. That moment just now had given her too much of a shock. The array disk had only been activated, but the power that erupted from it had completely annihilated the troops of the Iron Islands and Iron Hook Island. This was too unbelievable. The array disk returned to Lu Hanlin's hand, but the latter's beautiful eyes were filled with a complicated look. She muttered in a low voice, "Who is Longwen?" Lu Hanlin knew that someone who could casually send out such a powerful array disk was definitely not an ordinary person. Even her father, the island master of the Iron Islands, did not have such a powerful array disk. "This is an antidote pill. Give it to your brother, and he will recover soon." Suddenly, an indifferent voice came from behind her. Lu Hanlin quickly turned around and saw a white-robed young man floating in the air behind her. Beside the white-robed young man were two divine swords. Lu Hanlin was no stranger to these two divine swords. They were the divine swords that had previously excavated the disaster crystal vein in front of their group. Lu Hanlin had personally experienced the power of the two divine swords. In her opinion, any one of the divine swords was probably more powerful than her father, the island master of the Iron Islands. Previously, she was still guessing what kind of almighty being the owner of these two divine swords was, but she didn't expect it to be Long One, who had joined their team at the beginning. Lu Hanlin silently accepted the detoxification pill that Zhuo when tossed to her. She thanked him softly and fed the detoxification pill to Lu Rufeng. Not long after, Lu Rufeng, who was already deeply poisoned and unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. The black gas on his face also faded away. "Brother, you're finally awake." Lu Hanlin hugged Lu Rufeng excitedly. "What's going on here?" Lu Hanlin helped Lu Rufeng up and briefly told him what had happened here. Lu Rufeng also knew that the young man in white floating in the air was his savior. "Senior, this junior has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me, Senior, and thank you for saving my life." Lu Rufeng cupped his hands respectfully, but he was extremely surprised. He did not expect that the ordinary Long One, who had joined their team before, was actually such a powerful expert. Lu Rufeng was not a fool. He knew that an expert like Long One had joined his group for the purpose of entering the Disaster Canyon. Zhuan nodded and did not pay much attention to the siblings. To put it bluntly, Zhuan was no longer someone from the same world as the two of them. His cultivation was far greater than theirs. He had only followed the group from the Iron Islands because he wanted to use the Iron Islands to enter the Canyon of Disaster. Now that he had returned the favor for leading him into the Disaster Canyon, he did not want to be too involved with the two of them. "Xiaohei, have you dug out all the mineral veins in the Disaster Canyon?" Zhuowen asked. Blackie sat on the hilt of his sword and said in an old-fashioned manner, "That's not the case. There are too many mineral veins in this Disaster Canyon. Naturally, the quality of the mineral veins is uneven. This time, the little blood disciple and I have specially selected high-quality mineral veins to dig. As for the inferior ones, we are too lazy to dig." Zhuo nodded. Just now, he had scanned the area with his soul consciousness and found that the quality of the mineral veins that Xiaohei and Blood Immortal had dug out were very high. The purity was even higher than the disaster crystal he had obtained in the trial ground. Moreover, the quantity of mineral veins that they had dug out this time was not small. It was much more than the disaster crystal he had obtained in the trial ground. Although Devour was approaching the Three Disasters realm, His need for disaster crystal would be much higher than before. However, Zhuowen did not want to dig out all the mineral veins in the disaster canyon. After all, if he dug them all out, it would cause a big commotion. Moreover, he did not know if the mysterious woman was still there. He did not want to alert the enemy. In the future, if he lacked disaster crystal, he could come to the disaster canyon again. After all, he had marked this canyon. It would be much more convenient for him to come here next time. After Zhuowen collected the disaster crystal veins into Devour's internal world, he glanced at Liu Hanlin and Liu Ruff. Then, he took the Blood Immortal Sword and the Thunder Fire Sword and dashed toward the entrance of the disaster canyon. Senior, what's your name after all? Just as Zhuowen was about to leave the disaster canyon, Liu Hanlin clenched her teeth and suddenly shouted. Liu Ruffing was so scared that he hurriedly covered her mouth. Zhuowen did not stop because of Liu Hanlin's voice. He just replied indifferently, Zhuowen. Looking at the disappearing figure, Liu Hanlin was disappointed and disappointed. She sighed and said, his name is Zhuowen. Zhuowen? I seem to have heard this name before. Liu Ruffing frowned and said, brother, let's go. There are so many people with the same name in this world. Maybe you remembered wrongly. Liu Hanlin shook her head and said helplessly. Liu Ruffing nodded, and the two of them left the disaster canyon. This time, their losses in the disaster canyon were not small. Moreover, they were attacked by the Iron Hook Island. This time, when they returned, they would definitely report to their father. At that time, they would flatten the Iron Hook Island. Right, I remember now. I've heard of Zhuowen's name before. Moreover, it's like thunder in my ears. I remember there was a rumor in the star field that a young cultivator named Zhuowen had single-handedly destroyed 5 of the top 10 sects in the star field. His name was illustrious in the star field, and it shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. When leaving the disaster canyon, Liu Ruffing suddenly remembered something and quickly said to Liu Hanlin. Liu Hanlin was startled and immediately opened her mouth wide. She could not hide the shock in her eyes. She had also heard of Zhuowen's deeds. At first, she did not react. Now that Liu Ruffing said it, the young man who called himself Zhuowen was most likely the Zhuowen in the star field. Both of them were equally mysterious and powerful. It seems that we missed out on something. If we could get closer to that person, it would be a lot of benefits for our Iron Islands. Liu Ruffing said with some annoyance. Liu Hanlin said calmly, brother, we're not on the same level as him. We are lucky that he helped us. Chapter 2262. Meet my Yujia again after leaving Disaster Canyon. Zhongwen was about to leave waning, but an untimely voice appeared behind him. Aya, so was Brother Zhua. What a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet Brother Zhua here. As soon as the voice came out, Zhuowen's pupils suddenly shrank. He turned around and stared at the owner of the voice. This was a fatty. He was round and his face was rosy. He looked rather comical and laughable. However, the moment Zhuowen saw the fatty, a cold light filled his eyes. With a wave of his sleeve, mighty god force surged out, forming a giant hand that slammed towards the fatty. Bang! The fat man smiled. He stretched out his fat hand and clenched his fist. Instantly, the giant hand, made of divine power, was smashed into pieces by the fat man's hand. Zhuowen could not help but take a few steps back. He looked at the fatty in front of him cautiously. He was quite shocked in his heart. The fat man who suddenly appeared in front of him was none other than Ma Yujia, who had swindled the white space-time key from the small world. Back then, Zhuowen only thought that Ma Yujia's array Tao level was terrifyingly strong. Now that they had a rematch, Ma Yujia's strength was actually this strong. Moreover, Zhuowen still couldn't see through this fatty's true strength. It could be seen that this fatty's concealment technique was extremely brilliant. In addition, Zhuowen knew nothing about the fatty's background, so Zhuowen was still extremely wary of the fatty. Aya, Brother Zhua, what's the meaning of this? When old friends meet, why are you fighting and killing? Ma Yujia patted his stomach and shook his head as he spoke. But Zhuowen snorted coldly and said, Brother Ma, You can't have forgotten what you've done, right? Is the white space-time key with you? Ma Yujia rolled his eyes and hurriedly denied. How is that possible? How could the space-time key be with me? Don't accuse me wrongly. Zhuowen sighed in his heart. He knew that the fatty was not a simple person. It would be harder to get the fatty to admit that he had the white space-time divine key. Brother Zhuo, I don't know what happened to you, but at that time, this Ma really did hand the key to your hand. Don't deny it. Ma Yujia hurriedly said. Zhuowen was too lazy to talk nonsense with this damn fatty. He knew that this damn fatty would never admit it. Instead, he said coldly, What do you want from me? Also, aren't you a Northern Universe cultivator? Why did you come to the Far West? Ma Yujia chuckled. This fat lord calls the world my home and has no fixed abode. I'm not a cultivator from Northern U. You might have misunderstood. Zhuowen did not answer. This damn fatty's origin was mysterious. He definitely would not tell the truth, so he simply remained silent. Ma Yujia saw that Zhuowen was silent and did not beat around the bush. Instead, he took out a spirit fox from his bosom. This spirit fox was only the size of a palm. It had light purple fur and purple eyes. It looked small and cute. Hidden spirit fox? Zhuowen looked at the purple spirit fox in Ma Yujia's hand in surprise. He naturally knew about the hidden spirit fox. It was also a kind of giant star beast. Although the hidden spirit fox looked small and cute in Ma Yujia's hand, if this hidden spirit fox really fought, it would become a giant beast thousands of feet long. The ranks of the hidden spirit fox were easy to identify. They were divided into 1 to 9 tails, with 1 tail being the lowest and 9 tails being the highest. The hidden spirit fox in Ma Yujia's hand actually had 7 tails. It was an extremely rare little guy in the 8 heavens. Of course, the hidden spirit fox was a kind of giant star beast. Although its combat strength was powerful, it also had a special ability. It was extremely sensitive to natural treasures. It could be said that the hidden spirit fox would not go to a place without treasures. Once there was a hidden spirit fox in a certain place, there would definitely be a great treasure hidden inside. Yes, this little guy is my pet. It's very cute, right? The reason I came to this far west land from Northern Universe is mainly because of this little guy. The fatty chuckled. There are originally many natural treasures inside the yin-yang waxing Quebec. This little guy is naturally agitated. This is very normal, Zhuowen said calmly. But Ma Yujia shook his head and said, Brother Zhuo, I'm not an ignorant person. The hidden spirit fox's range of sensing natural treasures is limited. Moreover, how far Northern Universe is from this yin-yang waxing K? I think you know better than me, right? Back then, when I just left that small world, this little guy became agitated. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He understood what Ma Yujia meant. The fluctuations of natural treasures were definitely limited by distance. It was already not bad that the hidden spirit fox could sense the fluctuations of natural treasures from tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. However, the yin-yang waxing K was at least 1 trillion kilometers away from Northern Universe. This was a very terrifying distance. If the hidden spirit fox could sense the fluctuations of natural treasures from so far away, it was either the hidden spirit fox in Ma Yujia's possession was not simple, or the treasure was so powerful that the hidden spirit fox could sense it from so far away. From Ma Yujia's expression, Zhuowen could see that his hidden spirit fox did not have such a powerful perception. Then, could it be that there was an earth-shattering treasure inside the yin-yang waxing K? Brother Zhuo, I see that you are a smart person. There should be an amazing treasure hidden in this yin-yang waxing Quebec, otherwise my pet would not be so agitated. Why don't we go search for the treasure together? Ma Yujia asked tentatively. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. How could this damned fatty be so kind as to share such a treasure with him? Zhuowen guessed that this damned fatty must have already entered the yin-yang waxing K before. However, he encountered some difficulties inside, so he left the treasure trove and planned to find someone to help him. Coincidentally, he met Zhuowen here. Zhuowen's heart was as clear as a mirror. Although he knew that this damned fatty might be dragging him down with him, Zhuowen did not intend to refuse. He also wanted to see what kind of treasure could cause the hidden spirit fox to become agitated from tens of millions of kilometers away. Although this damned fatty's strength was not bad, coupled with his powerful level, 9 array Dao, Zhuowen might have been afraid in the past. However, Zhuowen was not afraid in the slightest now. Ever since he had learned the technique of using the heavenly Dao from Mu Qinxue, coupled with the heavenly Dao blood in his body, the power he could unleash was absolutely earth-shattering. The heavenly Dao blood was his final trump card. If they really went all out, this damned fatty might not be Zhuowen's match. Zhuowen had just suffered a loss at the hands of this damned fatty. This time, Zhuowen planned to repay this loss. Chapter 2263. Spirit Foxma Yuja hadn't expected Zhuowen to agree so readily, and he was slightly stunned for a moment. But he quickly recovered from his shock and said, "I don't know where the treasure is either. Let's follow this little fellow." As he spoke, my Yujia released the spirit fox in his hand. The little fellow squeaked and shot toward the starry sky ahead at an extremely fast speed. Ma Yujia followed closely behind the hidden spirit fox the moment he left. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. He dared to conclude that this damned fatty had definitely been to the treasure land. Perhaps he had done something to the treasure land. Therefore, Zhuowen had to be extra careful when following behind this damned fatty. The two of them and the beast were extremely fast as they flashed towards the depths of the waning crescent. Even though there were more starry sky beasts the deeper they went, most of them had been scared away by the spirit fox ahead. Ma Yujia's spirit fox had 7 tails, and its strength was on par with an ordinary cultivator at the 7th step of the void sky realm. It was absolutely one of the top starry sky beasts, and any starry sky beast that were weaker than the spirit fox wouldn't dare casually challenge the little fellow's authority. Zhuowen followed silently. He noticed that the spirit fox was flashing towards the Sun Moon Lake that he'd gone to in the past. Zhuowen had gone to the Sun Moon Lake to find the Sun Moon grass under the guidance of the Tao Defiance. However, Zhuowen's memory of the faceless white-clothed woman in the Sun Moon Lake was still fresh in his mind. The white-clothed woman's strength was extremely terrifying and strange. He still felt his scalp go numb when he recalled the scene from that day. Zhuowen's gaze descended onto the fatty in front of him. He noticed that the fatty was slightly nervous as well. It seemed like the fatty had really been here before and had even encountered the white-clothed woman. As they approached the Sun Moon Lake, Zhuowen noticed that the starry sky beasts had become extremely rare, and there weren't any galaxies or meteorites in the surroundings. All he could see were countless pieces of rubble. Someone had probably intentionally destroyed this place. If Zhuowen knew that it was because of his escape that the white-clothed woman had wantonly destroyed this place, what would he think? "Brother Zhuo, we're here." Suddenly, the hidden spirit fox in front of him stopped. It kept squeaking, and its fur stood on end. A purple light flickered in its eyes. Zhuowen looked at the Sun Moon Lake in the middle of the 2 continents with a complicated and fearful look in his eyes. Back then, he had been chased by the woman in white until he was in a rather sorry state. If it wasn't for the fact that the infinite ice lotus just happened to restrain the woman in white, he really wouldn't have been able to escape. "Brother Zhuo, this little guy sensed that the treasure is nearby. Why don't we split up?" Ma Yujia turned around and smiled at Zhuowen. "Let's go in together," Zhuowen said meaningfully. However, Ma Yujia said righteously, "I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go in together. You have to know that there are 2 continents here. Moreover, there's a strange lake in the middle of these 2 continents. If we search together, I'm afraid it'll be a waste of time. It's better to split up," Zhuowen said indifferently. "Brother Ma, you don't need to beat around the bush. This place is called the Sun Moon Lake. I've been here before, and there's nothing on these 2 continents. Brother Ma should have something that you need me for, right? There's no harm in saying it directly." Ma Yujia's gaze changed, and he smiled awkwardly. "Io, so Brother Zhuo has been here before. That's really rude of me. It's really my first time here, so I'm a rookie. Brother Joie, please don't take offense. Ma Yuja laughed, and then said in a deep voice, I've also heard of the Sun Moon Lake. It's said that there's a white, clothed female ghost in the lake. For countless years, she's been living in the Sun Moon Lake. It's said that this white, clothed female ghost is cursed and is forever trapped in the range of the Sun Moon Lake. Anyone who enters the Sun Moon Lake will be entangled by this white, clothed female ghost, and their final outcome may be death from fear. Zhuo nodded. He'd encountered that white, clothed female ghost before. That female ghost was indeed strange. At that time, his attack had no effect on that female ghost, and, in the end, it was the everlasting ice lotus that helped him escape. Thinking of the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuo knew why this damn fatty was looking for him. It turned out that this guy had taken a fancy to the everlasting ice lotus on his body, which could restrain that white-clothed female ghost. Brother Zhuo, this white-clothed female ghost stays in the Sun Moon Lake all year round, and the humidity is very heavy. If you want to restrain this female ghost, there are only two ways. One is to use an extreme yang object to restrain this white-clothed female ghost, and this extreme yang object must contain the power of the origin of fire to be effective. Unfortunately, this mod doesn't have anything that contains the origin of fire. However, there's still another method that Brother Zhuo can help me accomplish. Ma Yujia looked at Zhuowen and laughed mischievously. The origin of ice? Zhuowen said indifferently. Yes, the origin of ice. When water meets cold air, it will condense into ice. That white-clothed female ghost is most afraid of the power of ice, and the origin of ice is the thing that can restrain this female ghost the most. Brother Zhuo has a treasure like the everlasting ice lotus, which can restrain that white-clothed female ghost very much. Before Ma Yujia finished speaking, he was interrupted by Zhuowen. He only saw Zhuowen indifferently look at Ma Yujia and said, Brother Ma, since you want to use my everlasting ice lotus, but you haven't been honest with me, how do you want me to wholeheartedly help you? Ma Yujia slightly frowned, and in his heart, he secretly cursed Zhuowen for being cunning. However, on his face, he put on a fake smile and said, Brother Zhuo is joking. Although this is my first time coming to the Sun Moon Lake, I have heard of this Sun Moon Lake. I want to find a treasure under the Sun Moon Lake. As long as Brother Zhuo helps me delay that white-clothed female ghost, then we can split the treasure equally. How about it? Zhuowen laughed and said, Brother Ma, your plan is very good. Do you think that I haven't entered the bottom of the Sun Moon Lake? When I entered the Sun Moon Lake, I even faced off against that white-clothed female ghost. Moreover, I can clearly tell you that at the bottom of the Sun Moon Lake, there is nothing else besides the sun moon grass. As for the treasure you speak of, why didn't I find it at that time? Ma Yujia's eyes slightly narrowed, and he silently looked at Zhuowen. After pondering for a moment, he embarrassedly smiled and said, Brother Zhuo, so you also look for the sun moon grass at this place. Actually, it's like this. Just now, I didn't make it clear. The location of the treasure is indeed at the bottom of the Sun Moon Lake. However, that's only a transmission array. As long as you can activate that transmission array, you should be able to enter the treasure's location. Just now, I didn't make it clear. Brother Zhuo, please forgive me. Zhuowen faintly smiled and didn't expose the contradictions in Ma Yujia's previous words. Although he still didn't quite believe Ma Yujia's current words, he knew that Ma Yujia's current words should be relatively close to the truth. Since it's a transmission array, why is Brother Ma so certain that the other end of the transmission array must be the location of the treasure? Zhuowen asked. Ma Yujia's gaze was dignified, and he said in a deep voice, that transmission array is unusual. It has existed for an extremely long time. Moreover, it's a one-way transmission array. You must know that generally, one-way transmission arrays are arranged in places where treasures are hidden. This kind of transmission array can only be used once. Chapter 2264. Promoted to 8th level divine array, Master Zhuan nodded and said in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, Brother Ma, come with me. My everlasting ice lotus should be enough to restrain that white-clothed female ghost." Ma Yuji didn't refuse and said with a chuckle, "Brother Zhuo is right. I'll go with you. This little guy will find the location of the transfer array for us." After the two reached an agreement, they rushed into the Sun-Moon Lake together. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake was milky white and emitted a sweet fragrance. Smelling this fragrance, one couldn't help but salivate. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake has a powerful poison. Even if it's an 8th level Void Heaven expert, if they can't resist the temptation of this fragrance and try to drink this water, they will immediately die from the poison. The moment Mayujia entered the pool, he sent a message to Zhuo with his divine sense, reminding the latter. Zhuo didn't reply. Even if Mayujia didn't say anything, he knew that this lake wasn't simple. Moreover, this wasn't the first time he entered this place. At that time, he already felt that something was wrong, so he didn't try the water. After entering the lake, the two were silent and vigilant of their surroundings. They were afraid that the white-clothed female ghost would suddenly appear. However, what made the two strange was that when they were about to reach the bottom of the lake, there wasn't the slightest trace of the white-clothed female ghost. When they reached the bottom of the lake, the two looked at each other and revealed a strange expression. The white-clothed female ghost disappeared. Zhuo whispered with a frown. Ma Yujia also revealed a strange expression. Actually, before he asked Zhuo for help, he entered the Sun-Moon Lake alone. At that time, he even met the white-clothed female ghost. How long had it been, and the white-clothed female ghost disappeared just like that? Could it be that something happened while he was gone? Brother Ma, where's the transfer array? Go there and take a look. Zhuo said in a deep voice. Ma Yujia nodded and pointed at the hidden spirit fox in his hand. The hidden spirit fox squinted its eyes and let out a squeak before flying out. The water of the Sun-Moon Lake did not pose any resistance to this little fellow. Ma Yujia and Zhuo followed closely behind. After a while, the hidden spirit fox stopped. Zhuo looked as far as his eyes could see, and he saw a 30 feet tall pagoda monument standing in front of him. There was a hidden array formation fluctuation around the pagoda stele. Zhuo carefully sensed it and found that the array formation fluctuation around the pagoda stele should be a type of hidden array formation. However, it had been destroyed by someone. Zhuo sighed helplessly in his heart. When he had first found the Sun-Moon Lake at the bottom of the lake, he had casually scanned this place. Because he had been too excited when he found the Sun-Moon Lake, he had not carefully investigated this place. He had missed the opportunity to discover this transfer array. Moreover, what Mayujia said wasn't wrong. There was indeed a one-way transmission array inside the pagoda monument. Moreover, this transmission array was extremely complex. It wasn't any weaker than the ancient transmission arrays in the star field. From this, it could be seen that this transmission array had been around for a very long time. Ma Yujia came to the side of the stone monument and gently stroked the pagoda stele with his right hand. He said, "Brother Zhuo, do you still not believe me now? To be able to spend so much effort on a one-way transmission array, do you think that there wouldn't be a rare treasure on the other side of the transmission array?" Zhuo nodded in agreement. Ma Yujia was right. There is only one purpose for setting up a one-way transmission array, and that was to teleport to a very important place on the other side. It was either a land of treasure or a land of inheritance. Can you activate this one-way transmission array? Zhuo asked. Ma Yujia nodded, but he was somewhat regretful in his heart. If he had known that the white-clothed female ghost was no longer here, he would not have invited Zhuo in no matter what. However, now that Zhuo had followed him to the bottom of the lake, how could he have a nerve to chase him away? Moreover, this damn fatty did not know if there was any danger on the other side of the transmission array. After thinking about it, he still decided to let Zhuo go in with him. Although Zhuo's cultivation was only at the Void Sky 6 steps, he knew that this Zhuo was not simple. Not to mention the infinite ice lotus, with this fatty's intuition, he could feel that this Zhuowen had an even more terrifying power on him. This was also the reason why Ma Yujie enthusiastically invited Zhuowen to go treasure hunting with him when he met Zhuowen at the Yin Yang Yuan Ke. Brother Zhua, don't you know my level of array Dao? Although this one-way transmission array was refined using ancient techniques with my level, I only need to study it for a period of time to break it. Ma Yujie said proudly. Zhuowen nodded. He didn't doubt the fatty's words. After all, this guy was a level 9 God Array Master. He was much more skilled than Zhuowen. It shouldn't be difficult for him to break this one-way teleportation array. Oh, right, Brother Ma. When the time comes, if it really is a treasure land, how will the treasures be distributed? Zhuowen asked casually. Ma Yujie laughed and said, Of course it will belong to whoever gets it. It will depend on their own ability. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. He felt that Ma Yujie's plan was not bad. Whether it was him or Ma Yujie, they naturally did not plan to divide it equally. Moreover, they were very confident in themselves, so it would naturally depend on their own ability. Next, Ma Yujie sat cross-legged in front of the pagoda monument. He formed a seal with both hands and took out an array disc that was fluctuating violently. He began to break the array. Zhuowen, on the other hand, stared unblinkingly at the fatty's process of breaking the array. After all, Ma Yujie was a level 9 array Dao master, and Zhuowen's array Dao had reached the pinnacle of level 7. Watching this guy break the array benefited him a lot. 3 days passed in a flash. Ma Yujie was tirelessly breaking the array, while Zhuowen was concentrating on watching. Although it was only 3 days, Zhuowen benefited a lot in these 3 days. One had to know that a level 9 array Dao master breaking the array in front of you was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for many array Dao masters. Ma Yujie slowly put away the array disc and let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the pagoda monument in front of him with bright eyes. The one-way transmission array was finally broken by him. When Ma Yujie turned to look at Zhuowen, he found that the latter was standing on the spot like a stone statue. Meanwhile, Zhuowen's right hand was like a madman as it began to shake constantly, as if he was deducing something. As he continued to deduce, there were extremely terrifying array ripples around him. The ripples were getting stronger and stronger, as if it was a concert that was about to reach its climax. This guy, his array Dao level is actually increasing. Ma Yujie's eyes narrowed. Before he could finish his sentence, the array Dao ripples underwent a qualitative change. In an instant, a terrifying gust of wind swept up in the surroundings and dissipated in all directions. He has advanced to a level 8 array Dao master. This guy. Chapter 2265. Starry Sky, divine vain thinking of this. Ma Yujie couldn't help but admire Zhuowen. This guy's talent in array Dao was indeed powerful. There weren't many people who could have an epiphany while watching others break through the array. Zhuowen opened his eyes, and a glimmer of light flashed through them. Soon after, a sliver of joy appeared on his face. He had never expected his array skills to break through to the 8th level at such a time. This had exceeded his expectations. Brother Zhua, congratulations. You actually made a breakthrough at this critical juncture. This is really beyond my expectations. Ma Yujie smiled insincerely as he cupped his hands and congratulated Zhuo Yifeng. Zhuowen didn't care. He just cupped his hands and looked at the pagoda steel. Brother Ma, have you broken through the one-way transmission array? Ma Yujie nodded and smiled. Yes. Brother Zhua, come with me now. Zhuowen didn't dawdle and came to Ma Yujie's side. Ma Yujie's eyes became serious as he looked at the pagoda steel in front of him. On the front of the pagoda steel, there was a depression. Ma Yujie formed a seal with his right hand and slowly pressed his right hand into the depression on the front of the pagoda steel. Suddenly, a light blue light like a whirlpool spread toward the surface of the pagoda steel. The surface of the pagoda steel emitted a light blue light. Then, a blue whirlpool appeared at the top of the pagoda stele. This whirlpool sank from the top of the pagoda stele and quickly enveloped Zhuowen and Ma Yujie. Zhuowen only felt a terrifying suction force, followed by a feeling of the world spinning. When he opened his eyes, what appeared in front of him was no longer the bottom of the sun-moon pool, but a huge valley. This valley wasn't an ordinary valley. The surface of the valley was dotted with stars, as if it wasn't a valley, but a starry sky. Zhuowen looked at the surrounding valley and felt the rich starry sky energy. He was finally shocked. This was because he found that the entire valley was composed purely of starry sky, divine veins. How many starry sky, divine veins were needed to form such a huge valley? The starry sky, divine veins, as the name implied, were the amalgamation of starry sky energy. They were also the essence of starry sky energy. In the outside world, starry sky, divine veins were very rare. Even Zhuowen had only seen a few, but this valley was actually full of starry sky, divine veins. Ma Yujie, who was standing next to Zhuowen, reacted immediately. He stomped his right foot and rushed toward the surrounding valleys like crazy. His right hand stretched out and grabbed several starry sky, divine veins, and put them into a spirit ring. By the time Zhuowen reacted, Ma Yujie had already collected 7 or 8 starry sky spirit veins. This guy, Zhuowen secretly thought that Ma Yujie was cunning. He also formed a giant hand of divine power, pulled out all the surrounding starry sky, divine veins, and put them into his spirit ring. Furthermore, Zhuowen felt that it was too slow. He summoned Xiao He and Blood Immortal to help him collect the starry sky god veins. Ma Yujie was even more cunning. He immediately asked the hidden spirit fox next to him to reveal its true form and crazily dig out the starry sky god veins. The hidden spirit fox was originally a treasure hunter. Its digging speed was much faster than Ma Yujie and Zhuowen. Seeing the hidden spirit fox's fast action, Zhuowen frowned. He had to summon the king's spirit, Chun Changsheng, and Zhang Ziqing from the Canglan secret territory. As soon as the 3 of them came out, they were shocked by the number of starry sky god veins in front of them. If Zhuowen hadn't shouted to remind them, they would have been stunned for a while. Besides, Zhuowen also summoned his doppelganger. He didn't care about exposing Devour's true form. With Devour's terrifying devouring power, his speed of collecting the starry sky god veins was much faster than Ma Yujie and the hidden spirit fox. Ma Yujie also saw Devour. His pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but mumble to himself, "It's Devour King. No wonder this guy gives me a dangerous feeling. He has such a trump card." Then, Ma Yujie's fear of Zhuowen increased. At the same time, he was shocked to see devouring speed of the starry sky god veins. Devour only needed to open its mouth to swallow dozens of starry sky god veins. Its speed and efficiency were much higher than his and the hidden spirit fox's. With the help of Zhuowen, the Thunder Fire Sword, the Blood Immortal Sword, and Chun Changsheng, almost 70% of the starry sky god veins in the valley were in Zhuowen's pocket. Ma Yujie, who was confident of winning, only got 30% of the starry sky god veins. After the 2 of them had collected all the starry sky god veins in the valley, the beautiful valley, which was decorated with dots of starlight, was now barren. After Zhuowen collected the starry sky god veins, he let Changsheng and the others enter the Canglan secret territory again. Ma Yujie came to Zhuowen's side, looking at Zhuowen deeply, and said, "You really can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect Brother Zhuo to have such a powerful doppelganger. It seems this Ma has misjudged you." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up, but he didn't answer. He didn't want to talk about Devour. Of course, he had 2 purposes for releasing Devour's doppelganger. First, he wanted to seize the starry sky god veins. The energy in the starry sky god veins was extremely abundant. With the help of these starry sky god veins, Zhuowen could save a lot of time in his cultivation. Although he had just reached the 6-step void sky realm, with so many starry sky god veins, he had hopes of reaching the peak of the 6-step void sky realm in a short time. If he had an epiphany, he could even reach the 7th step void sky realm. For him, the more of such good things, the better. The second reason was the deterrent effect. This Ma Yujia's identity was mysterious, and he was a ninth-grade divine array master. He must have seen a lot, so he naturally knew Devour King. If Ma Yujia knew that Zhuowen's doppelganger was Devour King, it would serve as a deterrent. He was indirectly telling Ma Yujia that he, Zhuowen, wasn't a pushover. Ma Yujia was a smart person. He knew that Zhuowen didn't want to discuss this matter, so he chuckled and said, "Brother Shu, this place is indeed a treasure trove. We obtained so many starry sky god veins as soon as we entered. I'm afraid that there are even better things in the depths." Zhuowen nodded and said in a deep voice, "This place seems to be a secret territory. The transmission array is a one-way transmission array. How we leave this place?" Ma Yujia wasn't worried at all. He said, "Generally, a treasure trove will have a one-way transmission array. We just need to find it here." Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. His gaze fell on the end of the valley, where there was a path of nothingness. This secret territory was very strange. Everything in the surroundings was formed by the starry sky, and this valley was no exception. The path at the end of the valley was also a starry sky path, flickering with specks of starlight. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.